Have you ever sat in a sweltering outdoor stadium wearing a black academic gown watching three empty folding chairs while your name is called for highest honors? Imagine the sun beating down on the graduation lawn of a major Arizona university. The heat radiating off the synthetic turf is blinding. The air smells of sunscreen and hot asphalt. Hundreds of families are cheering, holding up handmade signs, and passing around cold water bottles, while the university band plays the processional march. I am Catherine Murphy. I just graduated summa cum laude with a degree in forensic accounting. I scan row G, section 4. The metal bleachers are packed with proud parents taking photographs. But my designated seats are vacant. My parents, Brenda and Richard, are missing. My older sister, Jessica, is missing. They did not get caught in Phoenix traffic. They did not experience a sudden medical emergency. They skipped my college graduation because Jessica scheduled a last-minute bridal shower brunch at a country club in Scottsdale. My parents decided her mimosa toast was a higher priority than my academic career. I sit back down on the bleachers. The desert heat presses against my skin. I do not cry. I do not send a frantic text asking where they are. I look at the single person sitting in row G. My grandmother Evelyn sits tall wearing a tailored linen suit holding a graduation program. She meets my eye across the lawn. Her expression is not one of pity. It is a look of cold, grim validation. She knows exactly what Brenda and Richard are. My parents expect me to accept this. They expect me to play the role of the understanding younger sister who absorbs neglect under the guise of family duty. They expect me to show up at the brunch later, hand Jessica a beautifully wrapped gift, and smile for the social media photos while swallowing my resentment. Instead, I stand up. I walk off the field before the ceremony even finishes. I meet Evelyn at the edge of the stadium near the parking gates. We do not go to the country club. We get into her car and drive in the exact opposite direction. That single decision severs the invisible leash my family held me on for 22 years. Before I tell you how this empty row of chairs triggered a chain reaction that ended with my parents facing federal indictments and my sister losing everything, please hit the like button and subscribe, but only if you believe that toxic people deserve the reality they create. To understand the architecture of this betrayal, you have to understand the economy of the Murphy household. In forensic accounting, we follow the money to find the truth. In my family, you follow the attention. Jessica was the golden investment. She was charismatic, loud, and obsessed with social optics. Brenda and Richard viewed her as a direct extension of their own status within the Paradise Valley elite. They paid for pageant coaches, designer wardrobes, and expensive sorority dues without hesitation. I was the utility account. I was quiet, pragmatic, and self-sufficient. I earned academic scholarships to ensure I carried no debt. I worked early morning shifts at a local tax firm to pay for my own textbooks and housing. When I won a regional math competition in high school, Brenda forgot to pick me up from the tournament. When Jessica placed fourth in a local beauty pageant, Richard bought a new car for her to drive. The disparity was not a secret. It was the governing law of our household. You learn a lot about human behavior when you view it through the lens of a balance sheet. People allocate resources to the things they value. My parents viewed me as a low-maintenance asset that required zero emotional capital. They knew I would survive on my own, so they diverted all their funding to the failing venture that was my sister. Jessica dropped out of 2 different degree programs because the coursework was too demanding. Brenda framed it as a creative journey to discover her true passions. I treated my own life like a strict audit. I optimized my time, secured a high-paying position at a top-tier Phoenix accounting firm, and prepared to build my own sanctuary. The graduation incident was not an isolated misstep. It was the culmination of a lifelong pattern. But sitting in the passenger seat of Evelyn's car, watching the desert landscape blur past the window, I felt a profound shift in my own internal logic. I was no longer a daughter seeking validation from a deficit account. I was an auditor closing the books on a bad investment. I refused to spend another decade trying to balance a ledger that was rigged against me from the start. Evelyn understood this transition better than anyone. My grandmother built a commercial real estate portfolio from scratch in the 1970s. This was an era when banks routinely denied women commercial loans without a male co-signer. She did not complain about the unfairness of the system. She navigated around it using shell companies and private backing until she held more leverage than the men trying to block her. She was sharp, pragmatic, and possessed a lethal understanding of market dynamics. Richard was her only son, and she viewed him with a mixture of quiet disappointment and clinical detachment. She knew Richard married Brenda for her country club pedigree. She watched them spend decades projecting an image of old money while secretly drowning in new debt. Evelyn recognized a bad investment when she saw one. We sit at a quiet table in a high-end steakhouse in North Scottsdale. The restaurant is dark and cool, providing a sharp contrast to the blistering Arizona sun outside. Evelyn orders a dry martini. I order ice water. We do not discuss the empty chairs at the graduation. We do not analyze Brenda's motives or Richard's passivity. We talk about tax codes, property depreciation, and commercial market trends. Evelyn treats me like a peer. She is the only person in the bloodline who respects the way my mind works. Halfway through the meal, Evelyn sets her glass down. The ice clinks against the crystal. She looks at me with eyes that miss nothing. She tells me that Brenda called her yesterday asking for a large cash transfer to Jessica's wedding fund. Evelyn notes that the requested amount was equal to the exact cost of my 4-year university tuition. The sheer audacity of the request hangs in the cool air of the restaurant. Brenda and Richard refused to contribute a single dollar to my education, but they felt entitled to demand that same sum from my grandmother to pay for ice sculptures and imported champagne for Jessica's reception. Evelyn leans forward. Her voice is a low, steady hum over the ambient noise of the dining room. She says that watching them abandon me on my graduation day clarified her estate planning. She says toxic families operate like Ponzi schemes. They drain the reliable members to sustain the illusion of the golden child. The moment you stop providing returns, they discard you. She tells me it is time to cut their emotional supply lines. This is a critical concept that most people misunderstand about setting boundaries. Society conditions us to believe that family requires infinite forgiveness. We are taught to manage the dysfunction, to act as the peacemaker, and to endure the slight because shared genetics demand loyalty. But loyalty without reciprocity is just exploitation disguised as tradition. When you repeatedly offer grace to people who view your presence as an afterthought, you are funding your own emotional bankruptcy. The only way to deal with entitled manipulators is to bankrupt their influence over you. You stop explaining. You stop negotiating. You simply close the account. I look at Evelyn across the white tablecloth. I tell her the account is closed. The fallout from the graduation absence begins later that evening. I return to my cramped studio apartment near the university. The air conditioning unit hums loudly in the window, fighting the evening heat. I open my laptop and begin reviewing client files for my upcoming firm orientation. My phone screen lights up on the desk. It is a text message from Brenda. She does not apologize for missing the ceremony. She does not ask how the graduation went or offer congratulations. She sends a picture of Jessica holding a crystal mimosa flute, surrounded by expensive gifts at the country club. The text beneath the photo reads, "We missed you at the brunch, Catherine. Jessica is a little hurt you did not show up to celebrate her special day. We need you to transfer your portion of the bridesmaid dress deposit by tomorrow morning." I stare at the glowing screen. The psychological projection is a masterclass in manipulation. They abandoned me on the day I earned my degree, and within 8 hours they managed to frame themselves as the victims of my absence. Brenda expects me to apologize. She expects me to transfer the money to alleviate the artificial guilt she just manufactured. She expects the utility account to pay out on demand. I do not type a paragraph explaining my feelings. I do not demand an apology for the empty chairs. Entering an argument with a manipulator validates their premise that your boundaries are up for debate. I delete the message. I block her number on my phone. I block Richard's number. I block Jessica's number. The silence that follows is profound. It is not the silence of a victim hiding from an attack. It is the silence of a reinforced steel vault locking its doors. Over the next few weeks, I transition into my new role at the corporate accounting firm. The environment suits my psychology perfectly. The office features soundproof glass conference rooms and rows of quiet, diligent analysts. I wear tailored suits. I audit complex corporate ledgers, looking for hidden liabilities and phantom accounts. I treat my career with the same ruthless precision Evelyn applied to her real estate empire. Dissecting a fraudulent corporate balance sheet feels remarkably similar to analyzing my own family dynamic. You look for the discrepancies between what is reported and what actually exists. I move through the sun-baked streets of Phoenix with a new sense of purpose. I do not attend Sunday dinners at my parents' house in Paradise Valley. I do not reply to the passive emails Brenda routes through my extended relatives claiming they miss my face. I become a ghost to them. But in the logistics of family warfare, radio silence is never the end of the conflict. It is merely the calm before the siege. Manipulators rely on access. When you deny them access, they do not reflect on their behavior. They escalate their tactics. They view your independence as a direct threat to their control structure. My parents operate under the assumption that I will eventually cave. They believe the silent treatment will starve me into submission. They do not realize that I am not starving. I am thriving. I am building a fortress brick by brick, and I am learning how to read the hidden ledgers of human behavior. Evelyn watches my transition with quiet approval. We continue our weekly dinners. She reviews my investment portfolios, and I analyze her property tax liabilities. We build an alliance grounded in mutual respect and cold, hard numbers. She sees that I possess the grit Richard lacks. She sees that I am the only person in the family immune to Brenda's theatrical guilt trips. The final piece of this initial phase locks into place on a Tuesday evening in late September. The Arizona heat finally begins to break. I am sitting in Evelyn's home office reviewing a commercial lease agreement for one of her retail properties. The room smells of old paper and leather. Evelyn sits behind her heavy mahogany desk watching me work. She asks me to close the file. She unlocks a side drawer and pulls out a thick manila envelope. The paper is crisp legal stock. She slides it across the desk toward me. She says that ignoring Brenda and Richard is a good first step, but passive defense is not a sustainable strategy against active predators. She says my parents are burning through capital at an unsustainable rate to fund Jessica's wedding and their own social facade. Evelyn looks me dead in the eye. She tells me that when their money runs out, they will hunt for a new funding source. They will look for an unencumbered asset to leverage. She says the upcoming storm requires a shelter they cannot breach. I reach across the desk and open the envelope. I slide the documents out and read the first page. It is a recorded property deed. The address listed is a penthouse in the most exclusive high-rise tower in downtown Scottsdale. It is Evelyn's crown jewel. And the name on the title is Catherine Murphy. Evelyn leans back in her chair. She tells me it is time to secure the perimeter. I stare at the crisp legal paper resting on the heavy mahogany desk. The deed is fully executed. Evelyn bypasses the primary family trust entirely. The traditional estate plan dictated that her assets would funnel down to Richard upon her death. My grandmother knows that if Richard inherited her empire, he would liquidate it within a year to fund country club memberships and European vacations for Jessica. Evelyn prevents the structural collapse by amputating the rotting branch. She signs the $4 million property directly over to me. My grandmother did not build her wealth by following polite society rules. Back in the 1970s, Phoenix was a boys' club. Male developers laughed when a young Evelyn walked into zoning meetings. She did not raise her voice or demand an apology. She quietly bought the adjacent land parcels, choking off their access routes, and forcing them to buy her out at triple the market rate. She built a commercial real estate dynasty through cold, calculated leverage. She looks at me sitting across the desk and recognizes the exact same tactical operating system. I am not the difficult daughter. I am the sole viable successor. The asset in question is not just a piece of real estate, it is a fortress in the sky. The penthouse occupies the entire top floor of a premier high-rise in downtown Scottsdale. The floor-to-ceiling glass walls offer an unobstructed panoramic view of the Camelback Mountains. The unit spans 6,000 square feet of custom Italian marble and imported hardwood. But the true value lies in the architecture of the security. Evelyn retrofitted the building access to military-grade specifications. The private elevator requires a rotating digital keycard. The main entrance features a solid steel core door governed by a biometric thumbprint scanner. The passcode regenerates every 12 hours. Without my physical fingerprint, nobody can cross the threshold. I accept the deed and take the oath of silence. For the next 2 months, I live a highly classified dual existence. Moving into a luxury high-rise requires precise logistics to avoid detection. I keep the lease active on my cramped university studio to maintain a visible decoy. I hire private couriers to transport my essential belongings during the late-night freight elevator shifts. Stepping out of the elevator into that penthouse becomes my daily psychological reset. The triple-paned glass filters out the noise of the Scottsdale Entertainment District below. I stand on the heated floors watching the desert sun set behind the red rocks, knowing I am finally secure. Meanwhile, the temporary silence from Paradise Valley fractures. Toxic people cannot survive a prolonged lack of attention. The withdrawal symptoms always force their hand. My cell phone buzzes on a Wednesday afternoon while I am reviewing a corporate tax ledger. It is a group text from Brenda, including Jessica and Richard. They do not ask about my new job at the accounting firm. They do not apologize for the graduation absence. They initiate contact with a direct financial demand. Jessica complains that the wedding florist requires a secondary deposit for imported white orchids. Brenda types a long paragraph stating that since I recently started a corporate job, I surely possess a surplus of graduation cash and signing bonuses. She demands I wire $5,000 to Jessica's vendor portal by the end of the business day. She frames this extortion as a mandatory sisterly duty. This is the core delusion of a parasitic family structure. They do not view your success as your own achievement. They view your career as an unearned windfall that belongs to the collective. They look at my 60-hour work weeks and my grueling certified public accountant exams and see nothing but a backup credit line for a bridal bouquet. Manipulative households operate on a designated scapegoat economy. The golden child is designed to consume resources while the scapegoat is designed to produce them. When the producing asset refuses to comply, the family system faces an existential threat. They believe that shared genetics obligate me to fund their social climbing. They do not realize that demanding a return on an investment they never made is terrible business. I do not reply. I leave the red receipt active so they know their demand was received and deliberately ignored. I put my phone face down on the marble kitchen island and open my laptop. Ignoring them is satisfying, but survival requires actionable intelligence. In forensic accounting, we verify every claim against public data. I decide to run a quiet audit on my own parents. Using public county records and state business registries, I trace the footprint of Richard's recent transactions. The data reveals a frightening trajectory. My parents are operating on the delusion that projecting wealth will somehow manifest actual solvency. Richard recently remortgaged their Paradise Valley estate. He pulled out significant equity to maintain their baseline luxury lifestyle. They are hosting charity dinners and booking private golf lessons while their debt-to-income ratio spirals toward a lethal threshold. They are paying credit card minimums with secondary equity lines. The financial rot is deep and it is accelerating. I track the public filings tied to Jessica's upcoming wedding venue. The resort in Sedona requires a deposit structure that Richard cannot sustain with his current liquidity. The math does not lie. They assume my income will serve as their safety net when the margins finally collapse. They believe that blood relation obligates me to catch them when they fall. They do not realize the safety net was dismantled the moment they chose an empty folding chair over my college graduation. I pour a glass of ice water and watch the city lights flicker to life across the valley. The tension inside the penthouse hums like a live wire. I know this covert operation cannot last forever. Evelyn is 88 years old and her health is beginning to wane. The moment her heart stops, My parents will expect the primary trust to unlock. They will expect to inherit the exact property I am currently standing in. They will plan to liquidate this fortress to cover their hidden debts. I review the biometric security protocols one more time, verifying the perimeter. The silent war is escalating, and I am waiting for the inevitable day the trapdoor swings open. Evelyn passes away quietly in her sleep during the first week of November. The shift in the world feels monumental to me, but my family treats her death as a convenient administrative hurdle. The memorial service takes place at an upscale chapel in Paradise Valley. It does not resemble a gathering of mourning relatives. It resembles a corporate networking mixer. Brenda wears a tailored black designer dress that looks better suited for a charity gala than a funeral. She spends the afternoon floating between groups of local politicians and wealthy contractors offering practiced, tragic smiles. Richard treats the reception line like a business opportunity, handing out his firm contact information to my grandmother's old real estate associates. He projects the aura of a man who is about to inherit a dynasty. Jessica stands near the catered buffet, complaining to her bridesmaids that the chapel floral arrangements are clashing with her upcoming wedding aesthetic. She treats our grandmother's casket as an inconvenient background prop. I stand near the perimeter of the room, wearing a simple dark suit. I watch them operate. They are not grieving the loss of a matriarch. They are waiting in a very expensive lobby for their payout. They believe the primary trust is about to unlock, bringing a flood of liquid capital to save them from their hidden debts. I drink a glass of water and observe their terrible confidence. I know the vault is already empty. 3 days later, the charade moves to a high-rise legal office in downtown Phoenix. The estate attorney is a pragmatic man named Mitchell. He directs us into a large glass-walled conference room. The air conditioning is running high, fighting the relentless desert heat outside. The city traffic is muted by thick window panes, creating a sterile, quiet environment. Richard takes a seat at the head of the heavy mahogany table. He drums his fingers against the polished wood, unable to hide his anticipation. Brenda sits beside him, crossing her legs and holding a pristine leather notebook. She looks like she is preparing to audit a corporate acquisition. Jessica is busy scrolling through her phone, checking vendor updates for her reception. I sit at the far end of the table, maintaining a neutral posture. Mitchell opens a thick, embossed binder. He reads the preliminary directives. He lists the minor distributions, the charitable donations, and the transfer of a few secondary bank accounts. Richard nods along, keeping a mental tally of the liquid assets. Brenda taps her pen against her notebook. They are waiting for the main event. They are waiting for the crown jewel to be handed over. The attorney turns a page and announces that the reading is concluded. The silence in the conference room is immediate and heavy. Richard stops drumming his fingers. He looks at the lawyer with a strained expression. He forces a polite chuckle and asks about the Scottsdale property. He mentions the $4 million penthouse overlooking the Camelback Mountains. He states that the unit was supposed to transfer into his control to manage for the family estate. Mitchell does not flinch. He looks over his reading glasses and delivers the logistical truth. He informs Richard that the Scottsdale penthouse is no longer part of the estate. He states that Evelyn executed an irrevocable deed transfer several months prior to her passing. Brenda drops her pen. It clatters loudly against the mahogany table. She asks who holds the deed. Mitchell looks directly at me. He announces my name. The physical reaction from my parents is a masterclass in structural collapse. Richard's artificial tan seems to drain from his face, leaving a sickly gray pallor. His jaw clenches so hard the muscles in his neck jump. He stares at the center of the table, unable to process the destruction of his financial safety net. Brenda reacts differently. The performative mask of the grieving daughter-in-law shatters into jagged pieces. Her eyes widen, and her posture goes rigid. She turns her head slowly to look down the length of the table at me. Jessica looks up from her phone. She is confused. She asks her mother what is happening. Brenda ignores her. Brenda is calculating the exact magnitude of the disaster. The asset they needed to leverage the property they secretly planned to use as collateral to save their fraudulent lifestyle is sitting in the hands of the daughter they discarded. I do not offer an explanation. I do not apologize. I gather my coat, thank Mitchell for his time, and walk out of the conference room. I ride the elevator down to the ground floor alone, feeling the adrenaline clear my system. The truth is finally on the table. The covert phase of the operation is over. I walk out through the glass lobby doors into the blistering Arizona sun. The heat radiates off the asphalt parking lot in shimmering waves. I reach into my purse for my car keys. I hear the rapid clicking of expensive heels striking the pavement behind me. Brenda intercepts me before I can unlock my vehicle. She does not look like a polished society matron anymore. The desert wind blows her hair across her face. Her breathing is shallow and erratic. She steps directly into my personal space, attempting to use physical proximity for intimidation. She skips the pleasantries. She issues a direct command. She demands we drive back up to Mitchell's office right now. She tells me I am going to sign a quitclaim deed transferring the penthouse into Jessica's name. The sheer psychological pivot is breathtaking. Less than a week ago, Brenda ignored my existence. Now she is standing on hot asphalt, demanding a multi-million-dollar real estate transfer, as if she is asking me to cover a lunch tab. She tries to frame the demand as a moral obligation. She claims Evelyn was clearly suffering from cognitive decline and made an administrative error. She says Jessica needs a proper home to establish her new brand as a married woman in Paradise Valley society. She frames the penthouse as Jessica's rightful wedding gift, portraying me as a greedy thief withholding family property. I stand my ground. The sun beats down on my dark suit, but I keep my breathing slow and steady. In forensic accounting, when someone presents a falsified ledger, you do not argue about their math. You simply reject the document. I look my mother in the eye. I tell her the property is legally mine and I will not be signing anything. Brenda's face flushes a deep mottled red. The veins in her neck become visible. When entitled people realize their standard manipulation tactics are failing, they experience an extinction burst. This is a behavioral psychology term. When a lab rat presses a lever and stops receiving a food pellet, it does not just walk away. It presses the lever faster, harder, and more erratically until it breaks the machine. Brenda is hitting the lever with everything she has. She steps closer, closing the gap until I can smell her expensive floral perfume mixing with the hot tar of the parking lot. She drops the loving mother facade and unsheathes a knife. She lowers her voice to a venomous whisper. She tells me she knows the managing partners at my new corporate accounting firm. She claims she plays tennis with the wives of the senior directors. She threatens to make a few discreet phone calls. She promises to spread a narrative that I am a predatory opportunist who manipulated a dying elderly woman out of her life savings. She says the partners at a top-tier Phoenix financial firm rely on ethical integrity. She guarantees she can have my career dismantled and my reputation ruined before the end of the fiscal quarter. The threat hangs in the thick desert air. She is using my own professional ambition as leverage. She expects me to calculate the risk of public humiliation and professional ruin. She expects me to decide that keeping my lucrative new job is worth more than fighting a protracted legal battle over real estate. She thinks the fear of losing my hard-earned status will force me to surrender the keys to the fortress. She waits for my armor to crack. She wants to see me panic. She wants to hear me plead for my job. I look at the desperation sweating through her expensive designer dress. I realize she is not threatening me from a position of power. She is threatening me from a position of profound terror. She needs that property to survive the financial avalanche Richard triggered. I do not raise my voice. I roll my jaw, look her up and down and turn my back. I unlock my car door, get inside and start the engine. I leave her standing alone in the suffocating heat, watching my taillights disappear down the avenue. The declaration of war is official. The family is no longer just a group of neglectful relatives. They are a hostile threat to my livelihood. They are preparing a coordinated strike against my professional sanctuary. I drive back to Scottsdale, knowing that surviving the next wave will require dissecting their lives with surgical precision. The shift from a private parking lot threat to a public smear campaign happens within 48 hours. Toxic family units operate like a hive mind when their primary resource is threatened. Brenda realizes direct intimidation failed in the blistering heat outside the lawyer's office. She changes tactics, delegating the social warfare to Jessica and her fiancé Trent. Trent is a fascinating study in artificial prestige. He works as a junior associate at a boutique commercial brokerage in Scottsdale. He survives on minimal base pay and the occasional commission, but he spends his days playing golf at the Paradise Valley Country Club to cultivate high-net-worth clients. Trent views his marriage to Jessica as a strategic merger. He believes he is marrying into generational wealth. He does not know he is marrying into a sinking ship. He spends hours at the clubhouse bar buying drinks for older investors, hoping to secure listings through association. Jessica sits beside him wearing imported sundresses, complaining about the stress of planning a high-society wedding. Together, they construct a narrative of victimhood that is incredibly effective in wealthy echo chambers. Jessica and Trent weaponize their country club access. They spend the weekend having quiet, tragic conversations over expensive cocktails. They sit in the shade of the tennis pavilion and tell anyone who will listen that my grandmother lost her mental faculties during her final months. They paint a picture of a predatory younger sister who isolated a vulnerable widow. They claim I drafted the deed transfer myself and forced Evelyn to sign it while my family was busy planning a wedding. Gossip in the Arizona desert spreads faster than a brush fire. The narrative is carefully constructed to target my exact vulnerability. They know I work in a sector that demands pristine ethical purity. The brush fire reaches my corporate accounting firm by Tuesday morning. I walk into the sleek glass and steel building in downtown Phoenix carrying my briefcase. The environment usually hums with quiet efficiency. Today, the administrative assistants avert their eyes when I step off the elevator. My managing partner is a rigorous man named David. He built the firm by auditing municipal bonds and unearthing municipal fraud. He calls me into his corner office before I even reach my desk. He sits behind his glass desk, looking troubled. He does not offer me coffee. David explains that he attended a charity dinner the previous evening. He sat at a table with several prominent local developers who do business with Richard. These developers control millions in municipal contracts. David tells me he heard disturbing accounts regarding my personal integrity. The narrative presented to him was that I utilized my specialized financial training to confuse Evelyn during her final days. He uses terms like elder exploitation and moral turpitude. He states that a forensic accounting firm cannot employ an auditor who engages in financial abuse. The liability is too great. He asks for an explanation, expecting me to offer an emotional defense or a quiet resignation. My mother expected me to crumble under this exact pressure. She expected me to sit in a leather chair and cry, defending my character with emotional pleas. She assumed the threat of losing my income would force me to call her and surrender the penthouse just to make the rumors stop. I do not cry. I do not raise my voice. I treat the accusation the same way I treat a mismatched corporate ledger. I stay factual. I reach into my briefcase and pull out a thick, certified folder. I anticipated this strike the moment Brenda cornered me in the parking lot. I place the folder on David's glass desk. I inform him that the rumors are a coordinated retaliation for my refusal to fund a wedding. I tell him Evelyn transferred her asset to me to protect it from my father's chronic mismanagement. I open the folder and present a series of documented medical evaluations. The records are signed by 3 independent neurologists affiliated with the Mayo Clinic. The dates on the evaluations match the exact week the deed was executed. The reports confirm Evelyn possessed a sharp, flawless mental capacity with 0 signs of cognitive decline. David reads the medical reports. The tension in the corner office evaporates. He is an auditor. He respects verified documentation over country club gossip. He closes the folder and hands it back to me. He apologizes for the intrusion and tells me to get back to work. I secure my job in less than 5 minutes. I win the battle, but I recognize the escalation. Returning to my desk, I process the mechanics of their strategy. The family is executing a coordinated siege. They are attempting to destroy my earning potential to starve me out of the penthouse. If I lose my corporate salary, I cannot afford the property taxes and maintenance fees on a $4 million asset. They want to force a liquidation. This is the danger of setting boundaries with individuals who view you as a resource. When you close the bank account, they do not walk away peacefully. They attempt to demolish the entire building. They want to prove that you cannot survive without their permission. There is a psychological concept called projection. Manipulators will always accuse you of the exact behavior they are currently exhibiting. It is a defense mechanism designed to distract the audience from their own crimes. Brenda and Jessica accused me of exploiting an elderly woman to steal real estate. By applying the rule of projection, I realize they are the ones engaged in active financial exploitation. Their smear campaign is a loud, desperate confession. They are not just angry about losing a family heirloom, they are terrified. That evening, I sit at the marble kitchen island inside the secure penthouse. The city of Scottsdale glows below me. I open my laptop and bypass my work servers. I begin a private forensic audit of my parents' financial footprint. I access the Maricopa County public property records. I pull the uniform commercial code filings and state tax registries. I cross-reference their names with local civil court dockets. I start mapping the movement of their money over the past 36 months. In accounting, missing inventory always leaves a paper trail. Debt leaves a crater. The data does not care about your social standing or your designer clothes. The numbers tell the objective truth. The anomaly I discover is breathtaking. My parents are projecting an image of unlimited wealth while secretly pawning their lifeboats. Richard has been quietly liquidating stable blue-chip retirement accounts for the past 2 years. But the liquid cash was not enough to sustain the burn rate of their country club dues and Jessica's lavish demands. I dig deeper into this property liens. Richard took out a substantial secondary mortgage on their Paradise Valley estate last year. The property appraisal was inflated using outdated market metrics. The home is now leveraged beyond its actual market value. He used the equity to pay off a series of high-interest business loans tied to a failed commercial development project in downtown Phoenix. He is paying off debt with debt creating a fatal financial loop. The interest payments alone are consuming his entire executive salary. Then I find the terrifying center of the maze. Richard has recent inquiries recorded from a private equity syndicate based in Nevada. I recognize the name of the holding company from previous audits. They are a hard money lending group. Traditional banks stop lending when your debt ratio reaches a certain limit. When you cross that limit, you turn to the shadow market. These unregulated lenders provide rapid cash injections, but they demand pristine, unencumbered physical assets as collateral. They do not accept highly leveraged homes. They require clear title deeds. The pieces snap into place with a cold mechanical precision. My parents do not want the penthouse so Jessica can host elegant dinner parties. That is the palatable lie they sell to their friends at the country club. They desperately need my name off the deed so they can pledge the $3 million property to the shadow lenders. They are standing on a trapdoor. If they do not secure this collateral, the syndicate will call in the debt, and their entire artificial empire will collapse into bankruptcy and potential criminal fraud charges. The pressure is suffocating them, and they are trying to transfer that suffocation onto me. They are hunting me because they are running for their lives. I close my laptop. I look at the reinforced steel front door of my sanctuary. The war is no longer about a wedding gift. It is about survival. I realize I need to fortify the perimeter because they are about to try and break the door down. The shadow loan inquiry on my computer screen shifts the entire landscape of this war. Greed is a predictable metric. You can negotiate with greed. Desperation is highly volatile and immune to logic. I spend the weekend conducting a full-spectrum forensic audit of my parents' lives. I treat their financial history like a hostile corporate entity. I map the outflow of their capital over the last 36 months, tracing every unrecorded deed and hidden liability. Richard is a senior partner at a local real estate development firm. He earns a healthy 6-figure draw, but his net operating income is essentially zero. I pull the county property records and unearth his unrecorded bridge loans. These are short-term, high-yield markers taken out against the remaining equity in their Paradise Valley estate. They function like payday loans for the wealthy, carrying punishing interest rates. Richard never learned how to build wealth. He only learned how to spend it to simulate status. He assumed the market would always rise to cover his poor decisions. When the commercial real estate sector cooled, he masked his losses by siphoning cash from these toxic bridge loans, moving money through phantom limited liability companies to hide the decay. I build a spreadsheet to track their daily cash burn. The drain is staggering, and the primary leak is Jessica. The upcoming wedding is not a celebration, it is a financial hemorrhage. I find public vendor registries showing Jessica booked a $50,000 imported floral package requiring out-of-season orchids flown in from overseas. She hired a celebrity event planner from Los Angeles who charges a 20% premium on all contracts. She demanded a custom lighting rig for the reception conservatory that costs more than a luxury vehicle. I watch the credit inquiries hit my parents' profiles week after week. The math dictates they will run out of liquid capital 14 days before the ceremony. The pieces snap together, forming a lethal picture. They are standing on a financial trapdoor. The Nevada Shadow Syndicate operates with strict execution dates. The private equity lenders demand the collateral transfer be finalized before they wire the funds to clear Richard's fraudulent bridge loans. If my father misses the deadline, the syndicate will seize the Paradise Valley home and file criminal fraud charges regarding his falsified loan applications. The $4 million penthouse is the only asset that satisfies the syndicate underwriters. This is why Brenda cornered me in the hot parking lot. This is why they attempted to terminate my career at the accounting firm. They are running out of oxygen. People often confuse malice with survival. We assume toxic family members plot our downfall out of spite or jealousy. While resentment plays a supporting role, the driving force behind severe manipulation is usually pure terror. Manipulators construct a fragile reality built on lies, borrowed money, and artificial prestige. They need you to act as their human shield to absorb the impact when the bill comes due. When you step out of the way, they are left facing the incoming fire. Understanding this changes your tactical approach. You stop taking their attacks personally. You stop reacting to their emotional theatrics. You start treating them like the erratic variables of a failing business model. I do not call Richard to confront him with the ledger. I do not send Brenda a copy of my spreadsheet. Revealing my intelligence gathering would grant them time to pivot or find a new victim. In the corporate sector, when a rival firm commits a fatal accounting error, you do not correct it for them. You let them file the false return and wait for the regulatory agencies to step in. I decide to let my family keep digging their own grave. I will let them print the gold foil wedding invitations and book the luxury caterers while standing on hollow ground. I will let the pressure build until it breaks them. However, cornered animals do not respect legal boundaries. If they cannot blackmail me out of my career, they will try to force their way into the asset. My parents view my property as their rightful salvation. They will convince themselves that a physical intervention is justified. I spend the following week fortifying my sanctuary, preparing for the inevitable breach. Evelyn installed a precise security network, but human error is always the weak link in any defense system. I contact the Scottsdale Building Management Office. I schedule a formal meeting with the Director of Security. The director is a retired law enforcement officer who appreciates clear, concise instructions. I sit in his ground floor office and slide a manila folder across his desk. The folder contains high-resolution photographs of Brenda, Richard, Jessica, and Trent. I do not offer a tearful family backstory or seek sympathy. I provide a strict, logistical directive. I instruct the director that these 4 individuals are permanently blacklisted from the premises. I mandate that their names be flagged in the visitor management software. I require a secondary verbal authorization from my personal cell phone for any delivery courier, catering staff, or floral vendor attempting to reach the top floor. Toxic people often use deliveries as Trojan horses to bypass front desks. The director nods and updates the building protocol in real time, establishing a hard perimeter. I return to the penthouse and bring in an independent contractor to upgrade the internal systems. The private elevator vestibule is already restricted, but I have the contractor reinforce the steel core door frame. We run a software upgrade on the biometric thumbprint scanner. The new protocol dictates that if an unrecognized print is scanned 3 consecutive times, the system triggers an immediate silent alarm directly to the local police precinct. I install hidden motion sensors near the entry point that link directly to my encrypted phone, providing real-time surveillance of my front gate. I treat my home like a classified data center. The air inside the penthouse feels different once the upgrades are complete. The silence is no longer just peaceful, it is armed and ready. I pour a cup of black coffee and stand by the floor-to-ceiling windows, watching the headlights crawl across the desert highways below. The Phoenix skyline hums with quiet energy against the dark mountains. I know they are running out of time. The wedding date is approaching rapidly, and their credit lines are snapping one by one. The social manipulation failed. The career sabotage failed. Their backs are pressed firmly against the wall. When psychological warfare yields no results, the desperate always resort to physical trespass. I sip my coffee and wait for the perimeter alarms to sound, knowing the next strike will happen right at my front door. I spent the week waiting for the perimeter alarm to sound. The wait lasts exactly 9 days. It is a Thursday morning. I am sitting in a glass-walled boardroom on the top floor of my corporate firm. We are reviewing a complex merger and acquisition audit for a regional healthcare provider. The room is quiet, except for the low hum of the ceiling vents and the shuffling of thick paper files. My encrypted cell phone rests face down on the polished oak table next to my legal pad. At 10:15, the device vibrates once. It is a solid, sustained pulse. The specific pattern indicates a priority security breach at my residential perimeter. I do not excuse myself from the table. I do not show alarm. I flip the device over and open the security interface, keeping the screen angled away from my colleagues. The application displays a live high-definition video feed from the hidden camera positioned outside my front door. Jessica and Trent are standing in my private elevator vestibule. Getting to that specific floor requires bypassing the ground-level security desk. I realize instantly how they orchestrated the infiltration. Trent prides himself on his interpersonal leverage. He works as a junior associate at a boutique commercial brokerage, but his actual skill set is identifying the weak link in any human system. He survives in his industry by faking proximity to wealth and talking his way into private country club lounges. The daytime concierge at my building is a young college student working the morning shift. Trent likely slipped him a few $100 bills, spinning a charismatic story about a surprise engagement party or a sudden family celebration. The concierge compromised the building protocol, allowing them unauthorized access to the restricted elevator core. Human error, however, stops at the reinforced steel frame of my front door. Trent steps up to the biometric scanner. He attempts to input a sequence of numbers on the digital keypad, assuming my passcode is something predictable like a birthday or a childhood address. The system rejects the code with a muted red flash. He tries a second combination. Denied. Jessica pushes past him, growing impatient. She treats technology the same way she treats service staff, expecting immediate compliance. She presses her thumb against the glass sensor pad, hoping the biometric reader will register a familial match or experience a convenient glitch. The software upgrade I installed functions with zero hesitation. 3 unrecognized entry attempts trigger a hard lockdown. I watch the live feed as the indicator light above the scanner shifts from a standby blue to a rapid flashing red. The elevator doors behind them slide shut and magnetically lock. Jessica and Trent are trapped in the 10-square-foot concrete vestibule. They cannot move forward into the penthouse and they cannot retreat to the lobby. The silent alarm is simultaneously routed to the local police precinct, providing the exact floor and quadrant of the trespass. My managing partner pauses his presentation. He looks across the table and asks if I need to step out to take a call. I look up from my screen and offer a calm, professional smile. I tell him it is just a minor logistics alert and urge him to continue with the revenue projections. Under the table, I press a single button on my interface, confirming the dispatch of local authorities. I do not call my sister to negotiate her release. I do not warn them that officers are en route. I let the legal machinery process the intruders. Two Scottsdale police cruisers pull up to the high-rise entrance within 7 minutes. The response time for a silent alarm in this zip code is exceptional. Uniformed officers enter the pristine marble lobby. They secure the building manager, override the elevator system, and ascend directly to the top floor. I watched the conclusion of the event on the recorded security log later that afternoon. The officers step out of the secondary elevator and find Jessica pounding her fists against my steel door while Trent frantically tries to pry the elevator panels open with his bare hands. The officers do not care about Trent's tailored suit or Jessica's designer handbag. They treat them like common criminals. Trent attempts to drop the names of local politicians and real estate developers, claiming a misunderstanding. The officers ignore his networking tactics. They point to the flashing red perimeter light and instruct them to put their hands against the wall. They are escorted down to the ground floor by armed police. The timing is a spectacular disaster for my sister. Midday in a luxury building means the lobby is highly active. Wealthy residents, personal trainers, and private chefs are crossing the marble foyer. Jessica is marched past a dozen prominent Scottsdale citizens by uniformed officers. The pristine social image she curates so aggressively on the internet is dragged across the floor in front of the exact demographic she desperately wants to impress. The officers issue them formal trespass warnings in the center of the lobby, ordering them to vacate the premises under threat of immediate arrest. I finish my board meeting, secure a profitable audit contract, and drive home. The desert evening is cooling down, painting the sky in deep shades of purple and orange. I brew a pot of dark roast coffee and walk out onto my balcony. The city lights stretch across the valley floor like a grid of glowing embers. I check my phone and see 5 missed calls from an unknown number. I open the voicemail inbox. The audio file is 3 minutes long. It is Jessica's voice, but the tone is entirely unfamiliar. The polished country club cadence is gone. It is replaced by a raw, unhinged screaming fit. She is calling from a burner phone, likely standing in a parking lot somewhere. She demands to know how I dare humiliate her in public. She accuses me of intentionally setting a trap to ruin her reputation. The desperation bleeds through the speaker. She blames me for the locked doors. She threatens to come back and break the windows. She threatens to hire thugs to drag me out of the building. She promises to burn my life to the ground. I listen to the recording twice while sipping my coffee. The hostility does not scare me. It validates my entire defensive strategy. Setting physical boundaries forces toxic people to reveal their true chaotic nature. When you remove their access, they lose their ability to manipulate you subtly. The performative masks slip, and you see the underlying rage that fuels their entitlement. They believe your property, your time, and your resources are natural extensions of their own domain. Denying them entry is viewed as an unprovoked act of aggression. They cannot tolerate a closed door. They will risk arrest before they accept rejection. You never negotiate with someone trying to break down your front door. You let them batter themselves against the reinforcement until they exhaust their own energy. The voicemail shifts near the end. Jessica runs out of breath and changes her tactic. She stops threatening physical violence and switches to legal warfare. Her voice drops into a cold, vindictive register. She says Brenda and Richard are done playing nice. She claims they retained a vicious probate attorney earlier that morning. She promises they are filing motions to freeze my bank accounts and seize the property by force. She says they are going to tell a judge that I stole a dying woman's estate. The physical infiltration was just a distraction. The real assault is happening in the courtroom. I delete the voicemail and turn off my phone. The siege is escalating, and they are weaponizing the judicial system. I stand on the balcony, feeling the night wind, knowing tomorrow I have to prepare for a legal war. Let us trace the timeline of the legal strike. The process server arrives on a Tuesday morning, exactly 4 days after the locked elevator incident. I am walking through the ground floor lobby of my corporate accounting firm holding a cup of black coffee. A man in a wrinkled gray suit steps directly into my path. He does not ask for my name. He simply thrusts a thick stack of bound legal documents into my hands and walks out the revolving glass doors. I do not drop my coffee. I do not gasp or look around to see if my colleagues are watching. I carry the heavy stack of paper up to my office, close the soundproof glass door, and sit down at my desk. I treat the documents like a raw data file waiting to be processed. The cover page features the seal of the Maricopa County Superior Court. The plaintiffs are Brenda and Richard Murphy. They hired a notoriously predatory local probate attorney. This lawyer operates out of a strip mall office, but his face is plastered on highway billboards across the Phoenix metropolitan area. He specializes in high-conflict inheritance disputes and relies on intimidation tactics to force rapid settlements. I read through the motion. The allegations are entirely fabricated, but they are drafted with a vicious mechanical precision. My parents accuse me of utilizing my financial expertise to isolate a declining elderly woman. They claim I exercised undue influence over Evelyn during a period of cognitive vulnerability. The filing is a masterpiece of character assassination, but the true danger is located on page 42. They filed an emergency request for a preliminary injunction. They are asking the judge to freeze all of my personal assets pending a full investigation. This includes my bank accounts, my investment portfolios, and the deed to the Scottsdale penthouse. The strategy is brilliant in its cruelty. They know I rely on my corporate salary to maintain the property taxes and the building maintenance fees. If a judge freezes my accounts, I cannot pay my living expenses. I cannot pay my utility bills. The legal strike is designed to starve me out. They want to create a situation where the financial pressure becomes so suffocating that I am forced to sign a quick settlement surrendering the penthouse just to regain access to my own checking account. This brings us to a crucial lesson regarding the psychology of leverage. Abusers routinely weaponize the legal system because it provides a legitimate, socially acceptable arena for their harassment. They understand that the judicial process is agonizingly slow and incredibly expensive. They do not actually want to go to trial. A trial requires evidence, and they have none. Their goal is to use court filings as a bludgeon. They want to drain your savings with retainer fees and bury you in procedural paperwork until you surrender your boundaries out of sheer exhaustion. My parents expect me to react with terror. They assume I will receive this stack of papers, panic about my frozen accounts, and call them begging for a compromise. They believe they have successfully cornered the utility account. They severely miscalculate my operational parameters. I do not handle threats with emotion. I handle them with superior firepower. I do not hire a family law practitioner to mediate a peaceful resolution. Family lawyers look for compromise. I want a corporate shark who understands the mechanics of a hostile takeover. I pick up my desk phone and contact a senior litigation partner at a rival firm downtown. Her name is Sarah. She spends her days defending multinational corporations against industrial espionage and breach of contract lawsuits. She possesses a reputation for being a cold, methodical operator in the courtroom. I meet Sarah in her high-rise office overlooking the downtown skyline. The room is sleek and intimidating. I place the injunction on her desk. I do not offer a tragic backstory about my graduation day or my sister's wedding demands. I stick strictly to the data. I lay out the timeline of the deed transfer, the medical evaluations, and the recent escalation of harassment. Then I present my theory regarding the shadow loan. I explain the sudden liquidation of my father's retirement accounts and the unsustainable cash burn rate required to fund the Paradise Valley lifestyle. I tell Sarah my parents are not filing this injunction out of grief. They are filing it because they are insolvent and facing a catastrophic default on an unregulated loan. Sarah reads through my notes. She recognizes a failing balance sheet when she sees one. She suggests we file a standard motion to dismiss the injunction based on the Mayo Clinic medical records. I shake my head. I tell her playing defense is a losing strategy. When toxic people attack you, defending yourself only signals that their false premise is worthy of a debate. I instruct Sarah to launch a counteroffensive. I tell her we are going to file a cross motion. If my parents want to accuse me of financial theft, we are going to force them to prove they are financially secure. I direct Sarah to formally request A full forensic discovery of Brenda and Richard's financial footprint for the past 36 months. We will demand their bank statements, their tax returns, their unrecorded property liens, and their credit inquiries. We will argue that their lawsuit is entirely frivolous and motivated by a desperate need to cover their own hidden debts. Sarah looks at me with a sharp, approving smile. She agrees to draft the counterfiling immediately. The preliminary hearing takes place 2 weeks later in a sterile courtroom in the Maricopa County Courthouse. The air is dry and smells of floor wax. I sit at the defense table wearing a tailored navy suit. I keep my posture perfectly rigid. Richard and Brenda sit at the plaintiff's table. They project supreme confidence. Richard wears an expensive suit that I know he cannot afford. Brenda offers a tragic, victimized smile to the court staff. Their billboard attorney stands up and begins his theatrical presentation. He talks about family duty and elder protection. He attempts to paint me as a calculating opportunist who robbed her own sister of a wedding gift. He demands the judge freeze my assets immediately to prevent further harm. Sarah does not match his theatrics. She stands up and addresses the bench with a quiet, lethal authority. She hands the judge the certified neurological evaluations proving Evelyn possessed flawless mental capacity on the day of the transfer. She dismantles their entire claim of elder abuse in less than 4 minutes using verified medical science. Then Sarah drops the payload. She explains to the judge that the plaintiffs are attempting to use the court to facilitate a property theft. She formally files the motion for comprehensive financial discovery. She states that Richard Murphy is heavily leveraged, operating multiple failed commercial ventures, and is utilizing this frivolous lawsuit to steal my client's home to save himself from bankruptcy. She requests immediate access to their financial records to prove the malicious motive behind their filing. The atmosphere in this courtroom undergoes a rapid shift. The billboard attorney looks at Richard with a sudden expression of confusion. Richard did not tell his lawyer about the shadow loans. Richard did not tell his lawyer about the insolvency. The arrogant posture drains from my father's spine. He realizes the trap he built for me just clamped down on his own leg. The judge reviews the medical documents. The bench does not tolerate the weaponization of the docket. The judge strikes his gavel. He flatly denies the emergency injunction against my assets. My bank accounts remain untouched. My penthouse remains secure. Then the judge turns his attention to our counter motion. He looks at Richard and grants our request for full forensic discovery. The ruling mandates that Brenda and Richard must produce their comprehensive financial records within 30 days. The hearing adjourns. I stand up, button my suit jacket, and gather my files. I look across the aisle at my parents. The illusion of the powerful Paradise Valley couple is gone. They look like two passengers realizing the ship is taking on water. They intended to use the legal system to starve me out. Instead, they handed me the judicial authority to rip their hidden lives wide open. The clock is now ticking. They have exactly 1 month to hand over the paperwork that will expose their interstate wire fraud and their catastrophic shadow loans. The 30-day deadline aligns perfectly with the week of Jessica's wedding. I walk out of the courthouse, stepping into the blinding Arizona sun, knowing the final phase of their destruction is officially in motion. The Maricopa County judge gave my parents 30 days to produce their financial records. They spend the first 3 weeks attempting to stall the process. Their billboard lawyer files a barrage of procedural delays, claiming the document request is overly broad and burdensome. Sarah does not entertain the delay. She files a swift motion for contempt of court, reminding the bench that Richard initiated the lawsuit. The judge issues a stark ultimatum: produce the ledgers within 48 hours or face immediate sanctions. The records arrive at Sarah's downtown office on a Friday afternoon. They do not arrive via a secure digital portal. They arrive in 4 heavy cardboard banker boxes. This is a classic obfuscation tactic used by guilty parties. They print out thousands of pages of raw, unorganized data, hoping to bury the opposing counsel in useless paper. They assume I will balk at the sheer volume of the labor. They forget I am a forensic accountant. I thrive in the deep end of a chaotic ledger. I spend the entire weekend in a glass conference room with Sarah and two junior paralegals. We order black coffee and build a timeline. We digitize the bank statements, the tax returns, and the property deeds. We feed the raw numbers into a proprietary tracking software. Slowly, the architecture of my father's ruin comes into focus. Richard was never a brilliant real estate developer. He was a charismatic salesman who rode the wave of a booming Phoenix housing market. When the commercial sector experienced a sharp downturn 2 years ago, his lack of actual business acumen was exposed. He spearheaded a luxury retail development in downtown Phoenix that went millions of dollars over budget. The anchor tenants pulled out, leaving him holding a vacant concrete shell. Traditional lending institutions demand rigorous audits. When the banks reviewed the failed retail project, they flagged Richard as a toxic liability and severed his credit lines. A rational businessman would have declared bankruptcy, downsized his lifestyle, and started over. But Richard and Brenda could not stomach the loss of their country club status. They chose to fund a mirage. When regulated banks close their doors, desperate men turn to the shadow market. I find the specific contract buried at the bottom of the third banker box. It is a loan agreement originating from a private equity syndicate based in Las Vegas, Nevada. This syndicate does not operate like a traditional bank. They do not care about credit scores or employment history. They function as high-yield, hard money lenders catering to desperate executives. They issue rapid cash injections to keep sinking businesses afloat, but their terms are lethal. I spread the contract across the conference room table. I trace the routing numbers and the signature lines. Richard borrowed $2.5 million from the Nevada syndicate to cover the losses on his Phoenix development and maintain the Paradise Valley facade. The syndicate underwriters required unencumbered physical collateral to secure the loan. Richard could not offer his primary residence because he had already drained the equity through secondary mortgages. He needed a pristine asset. I look at the asset declaration form attached to the Las Vegas contract. Richard listed the Scottsdale Penthouse. The date on the application is chilling. He signed the paperwork 4 months before Evelyn passed away. He forged a preliminary deed of trust, claiming he was the sole designated heir to the property. He submitted the application via an electronic portal crossing state lines from Arizona to Nevada. Sarah stops reading and looks at me across the table. The atmosphere in the conference room shifts from a civil dispute to a criminal investigation. My father did not just mismanage his portfolio. He committed interstate wire fraud. He leveraged a property he did not own, using falsified legal documents to secure a 7-figure loan across state lines. This is a federal crime carrying severe mandatory minimum sentences. We review the default clauses embedded in the final pages of the syndicate agreement. Unregulated lenders build trapdoors into their contracts. The syndicate set a strict maturity date for the loan. Richard is required to provide the verified biometric access codes and the finalized title transfer by the end of the current month. If he fails to deliver the collateral, the syndicate retains the right to execute a hostile seizure of his remaining assets, and they will forward the fraudulent application directly to the Federal Bureau of Investigation. I pull up the calendar on my laptop. I check the dates. The syndicate's final deadline falls on the exact same weekend as Jessica's wedding. The realization hits me with the force of a physical blow. The lavish desert botanical garden wedding is not just a party. It is a ticking clock. My parents are trapped in a pressure cooker of their own design. They are hosting 300 elite guests, projecting an image of unlimited wealth, while a Nevada syndicate holds a federal indictment over their heads. This explains the sheer terror driving their actions. This explains why Brenda ambushed me in the parking lot and why she tried to destroy my corporate career. This is why they filed a frivolous lawsuit and why Jessica and Trent tried to pry open my elevator doors. They are not fighting over a wedding gift. They are fighting to keep Richard out of a federal penitentiary. The Penthouse is their only lifeboat. They need my name off the deed and my biometric signature on their transfer portal, or their entire world burns to the ground. The conflict transforms in an instant. I am no longer a younger sister dealing with entitled relatives. I am a key witness sitting on the explosive evidence of a corporate crime. They built a house of cards on the assumption that I would always fold under pressure. They assumed the designated scapegoat would surrender her sanctuary to protect the family name. I gather the documents and place them back into the folders. I tell Sarah to halt all communication with their billboard attorney. We are not going to negotiate, and we are not going to warn them. They handed us the exact blueprint of their destruction. When you discover that toxic people are operating out of pure survival panic, you must brace for their most dangerous maneuver. A drowning man will pull his rescuer under the water just to catch a single breath. My parents know the legal injunction failed. They know the physical infiltration failed. They know the syndicate deadline is only days away. They have one remaining option. They have to lure me into a controlled environment and force a confrontation. I return to my apartment that evening and find a thick ivory envelope resting in my mailbox. The calligraphy on the front is elegant and precise. It is a formal invitation to Jessica's rehearsal dinner at an exclusive resort in Sedona. It is not an olive branch. It is a designated kill box. They are preparing one final operation to break my resolve and secure the asset. I place the invitation on my kitchen counter. I decide to attend. The drive up Interstate 17 from Phoenix to Sedona takes just over 2 hours. The landscape shifts dramatically as you gain elevation, leaving the flat brown desert behind and entering a canyon system defined by towering red rock formations. The invitation to Jessica's rehearsal dinner rests on the passenger seat of my car. Attending a social event hosted by people who are actively trying to destroy my life might seem counterintuitive. But in the corporate auditing sector, you never ignore an opportunity to gather baseline intelligence on a hostile entity. You need to observe their stress markers in a controlled environment. I want to see how a family operates when they are 72 hours away from a federal financial collapse. The resort is a masterpiece of exclusive luxury tucked deep into a private sandstone canyon. Valets wearing crisp, white uniforms rush to open the doors of arriving European sedans. I hand my keys to an attendant and walk through the sweeping timber-framed lobby. The air smells of burning cedar and expensive floral arrangements. The rehearsal dinner is staged on a massive outdoor stone terrace overlooking the canyon valley. Waitstaff carry silver trays loaded with artisan appetizers and vintage wine. Every single item on this terrace is funded by a fraudulent shadow loan. The opulence is not a celebration of marriage. It is a highly decorated crime scene. I stand near the perimeter of the terrace holding a glass of sparkling water. I watch Richard standing by the outdoor bar. He is wearing a custom-tailored suit, but the fabric hangs loosely on his frame. His skin possesses a sickly gray tint under the ambient patio lighting. He holds a glass of scotch in his left hand while his right hand constantly checks his cell phone. He is waiting for a status update from the Nevada private equity syndicate. The syndicate underwriters are likely demanding the finalized collateral transfer documents. Richard looks like a man standing on the edge of a cliff waiting for the wind to push him over. Jessica and Trent are mingling near the center of the terrace, oblivious to the impending disaster. Trent works the crowd smiling and shaking hands with wealthy relatives he hopes to convert into real estate clients. Jessica wears a white silk cocktail dress, complaining to the catering manager that the ambient music is too quiet. She treats the service staff with a casual disdain that reveals her deep insecurities. She defines her self-worth entirely by the perception of her peers. She believes the wealth surrounding her is a permanent birthright. Brenda is the architect of this facade. Throughout her life, she treated every holiday dinner and country club brunch like a tactical military deployment. She curates the perfect image to mask the dysfunction underneath. I watch her float between groups of guests offering bright practice smiles. But her eyes are frantic and sharp. She is scanning the terrace. She spots me standing near the stone fireplace. The approach is swift. Brenda walks over and touches my arm. The physical contact feels unnatural and rigid. She does not offer a greeting. She lowers her voice and asks me to accompany her downstairs to the private wine cellar. She claims she wants to show me a special vintage bottle she selected for the main toast. I know she is lying. I know this is a trap designed to isolate me from the witnesses on the terrace. I follow her anyway. The wine cellar is located 2 floors below the main lobby. We descend a winding stone staircase into a subterranean room. The climate control system keeps the air at a steady cold temperature. Floor-to-ceiling racks of expensive wine bottles surround a long mahogany tasting table. A small brass sink sits in the corner for rinsing glasses. The heavy wooden door swings shut behind us, muting the jazz music and the laughter from the terrace above. We are entirely alone. Brenda stops pretending. The polite host evaporates and the desperate predator emerges. She reaches into her oversized designer clutch and pulls out a thin black folder. She drops it onto the center of the mahogany tasting table. The sound echoes in the cold room. She tells me the legal games are over. She says the probate lawsuit was merely a distraction to keep my lawyers busy while she prepared the real leverage. She taps the cover of the folder with a manicured fingernail. I step forward and open the folder. Inside the cover are printed emails and corporate banking manifests. The documents bear the official logo and letterhead of my Phoenix accounting firm. The manifests detail a series of unauthorized wire transfers moving thousands of dollars from a municipal client account into a private offshore holding company. The authorization signature at the bottom of the financial transfer forms belongs to me. It is a forgery. It is a highly sophisticated digital fabrication designed to look like a leaked internal audit. Brenda steps closer. The dim ambient light of the cellar casts long shadows across her face. Her breathing is shallow and rapid. She delivers her ultimatum. She explains that she hired a private investigator with a background in digital manipulation to create the dossier. She tells me that on Monday morning, a courier will deliver copies of this folder to my managing partner and the state licensing board for certified public accountants. She promises the documents will trigger an immediate termination and a criminal investigation for corporate embezzlement. She says I will lose my career, my reputation, and my freedom. She points to the folder. She tells me I have until the cocktail hour of the wedding reception tomorrow night to provide my biometric passcode and sign the deed transfer for the Scottsdale Penthouse. If I hand over the property, the folder disappears. If I refuse, she destroys my life. I stare at the forged documents resting on the dark wood. I do not feel panic. I do not feel fear. I feel a cold mechanical clarity wash over me. I look closely at the digital signature spliced onto the fake wire transfer. I recognize the pixelation around the edges of the ink. I recognize the specific formatting of the fraudulent banking routing numbers. The pieces connect instantly. It is the exact same digital forgery technique Richard used to fake the property deed for the Nevada shadow loan. Brenda did not hire a sophisticated private investigator. Richard fabricated these documents himself using the same amateur software he utilized to commit interstate wire fraud. They are a one-trick pony. They applied the exact same strategy they used to trick the private equity syndicate. They are projecting their own criminal behavior onto me. They assume I will crumble under the threat of a federal investigation, because a federal investigation is their own worst nightmare. My mother expects me to break. She expects me to beg for mercy. She wants me to pull out my cell phone log into the residential management portal and punch my biometric code into the transfer screen right here in the cellar. She needs the collateral secured tonight to stop the Nevada lenders from foreclosing on her life. I do not argue with her. I do not point out the sloppy formatting of the forged signatures. Engaging in a debate validates a blackmail attempt. When someone points a loaded threat at you, arguing only proves you respect the weapon. I refuse to give her that power. I step away from the mahogany table. I walk over to the small brass sink in the corner of the cellar. I turn on the faucet and let the freezing water run over my hands. I wash away the tension of the drive. I reach for a linen towel and dry my fingers, methodically taking my time. The silence in the underground room stretches tight, pulling the oxygen from the air. Brenda watches me. Her confidence falters. She does not understand my reaction. She expects tears and pleading. The flat silence terrifies her. She asks me if I understand the severity of the situation. I drop the linen towel onto the counter. I turn around and look my mother in the eye. My posture is relaxed, but my gaze is steady and unyielding. I tell her the answer is no. I walk past her toward the heavy wooden door. Brenda loses her fragile grip on reality. She grabs my arm, attempting to physically prevent me from leaving the cellar. Her fingernails dig into my skin through the fabric of my jacket. She screams that I am ungrateful. She screams that I am destroying the family and hoarding wealth while my own sister suffers. The manic energy is explosive. I look down at her hand gripping my arm. I look back up at her frantic, terrified face. I tell her to let go of me. My voice carries no emotion. It is the flat, authoritative tone of an auditor closing a bankrupt account. She recoils as if she touched a live wire. I push the heavy door open and walk up the stone staircase, leaving her screaming in the cold underground room. The trap failed. The final negotiation is officially dead. Tomorrow is the wedding day, and the syndicate deadline will expire. I walk through the lobby, get into my car, and drive back down the mountain, preparing to launch the final countermeasure that will bring their empire down. The drive down the mountain from Sedona to Scottsdale takes place in complete darkness. Interstate 17 cuts through the desert landscape, offering nothing but the glow of my headlights, reflecting off the guardrails. The drop in elevation brings a steady rise in temperature, but the air inside my vehicle remains cold and climate-controlled. My mind works through the encounter in the wine cellar, categorizing every piece of data Brenda handed me. She intended to paralyze me with the threat of a forged corporate dossier. Instead, she provided the exact coordinates of her own vulnerability. By exposing her willingness to fabricate digital banking records, she confirmed that Richard utilized the exact same forgery technique to secure his unregulated shadow loan. Manipulators operate from a limited tactical playbook. Once you identify their pattern, you can anticipate their entire strategy. I pull into the secure underground parking garage of the Pinnacle Tower. The biometric scanner reads my thumbprint and the private elevator whisks me up to the top floor. The penthouse is silent. I do not go to the bedroom to sleep. I walk directly into my home office and boot up my encrypted workstation. The time for gathering baseline intelligence is over. It is time to initiate the countermeasure. In the corporate accounting sector, we routinely interface with private equity groups and hard money lenders. I understand the operational matrix of the Nevada syndicate Richard borrowed from. They are not a traditional bank governed by customer service protocols and federal grace periods. They are a mercenary capital firm. They issue high-yield loans to desperate executives, and they rely on automated escrow triggers to protect their investments. If a borrower defaults or commits application fraud, their algorithms immediately initiate asset seizure. They do not call the borrower to negotiate a payment plan. They deploy asset recovery agents and forward the fraudulent documents to federal authorities. I initiate a secure virtual private network, routing my connection through a series of offshore servers. I create a temporary corporate email alias. I am not sending a personal complaint to a customer service representative. I am submitting an anonymous risk management tip directly to the primary underwriting division of the Las Vegas syndicate. I compile the data packet with surgical precision. I attach the official Maricopa County property deed, proving Evelyn transferred the Scottsdale penthouse to me long before Richard signed his shadow loan application. I attach the county tax records showing my name as the sole proprietor of the unit. I highlight the specific dates and the notary stamps. The timeline proves beyond any reasonable doubt that Richard pledged a $4 million asset he had absolutely no legal right to leverage. I draft a concise cover letter using precise financial terminology. I inform the syndicate underwriters that their collateral is compromised. I outline the mechanics of the forged title Richard submitted. I cite the specific default clause in their own shadow loan agreement regarding fraudulent applications. I press send. The data packet flies across the digital network, bridging the geographic gap between Arizona and Nevada. The payload is delivered. Let me explain a fundamental rule of surviving manipulative people. When toxic individuals hand you a weapon, you never waste your time arguing with them about it. You do not demand apologies or point out the ethical flaws in their logic. When they reveal their tactics, they inadvertently expose the structural weakness of their entire operation. Brenda thought showing me the forged corporate documents in the wine cellar would break my spine. Instead, she handed me the exact mechanism required to destroy their fraudulent empire. You take the weapon they drop at your feet, and you simply point it directly back at their glass house. I close my laptop and watch the digital clock on my desk switch to midnight. The day of the wedding has officially arrived. The 24-hour countdown begins. The Nevada Syndicate underwriters open their office early on Saturday mornings to process high-yield escrow accounts. Within a few hours, a risk assessment officer will open my anonymous data packet. They will run the property records through their independent verification software. The algorithms will confirm the discrepancy. The automated system will flag Richard's account for catastrophic default. The loan will be voided, and the syndicate will immediately begin drafting the foreclosure notices for the Paradise Valley estate. They will also forward the forged application directly to federal investigators. My parents are sleeping in their luxury resort suite, completely unaware that the financial guillotine has already dropped. I wake up a few hours later as the morning sun crests over the Camelback Mountains. The desert light fills the penthouse. I brew a pot of black coffee and prepare for the final logistical operation of this war. I know my family is operating under a lethal deadline. The syndicate required the finalized biometric collateral transfer by the end of the weekend. My parents think they still have a window to force my compliance before the banks open on Monday. Since the private ambush in the Sedona wine cellar failed, Brenda and Richard have only one strategic option remaining. They must force a public confrontation. Manipulators rely heavily on the theater of social pressure. They construct scenarios where refusing their demands makes you look like the villain in front of an audience. They believe that the presence of state senators, local developers, and wealthy contractors will crush my resolve. They intend to use the wedding reception as a trap to extract the biometric passcode for the penthouse. I walk into my master closet to select my attire for the evening. I do not choose a pastel dress to fit in with the bridal party aesthetic. I select a tailored charcoal silk suit. It is sharp, minimalist, and professional. It is not wedding attire. It is tactical armor. I am dressing for a corporate liquidation. I review the logistics of the event while I get dressed. The ceremony and the reception are taking place at a sprawling botanical garden in the desert. 300 guests will be in attendance. There will be open bars, string quartets, and a massive dance floor. It is the perfect stage for a theatrical ambush. Brenda will likely orchestrate a moment where the attention of the entire room is focused directly on me. She will try to leverage the sheer weight of the crowd to force me to sign the property over. I stand in front of the mirror and adjust my collar. The anxiety that used to plague me before family events is entirely gone. It has been replaced by a cold, mechanical anticipation. For 22 years, they trained me to absorb their neglect and subsidize their delusions. They assumed the designated utility account would never shut down the power grid. They failed to realize that every time they demanded my silence, they were teaching me how to operate in the dark. The preparation is complete. The digital countermeasure is actively dismantling their shadow loan in Nevada. The legal discovery trap is waiting for them in Maricopa County. The physical perimeter of my home is locked down. There are no remaining vulnerabilities. I pick up my car keys and my small leather clutch. I step out of the penthouse and listen to the heavy steel door lock behind me. I walk toward the private elevator. The time for gathering intelligence is over. The time for passive observation has ended. I am ready to attend my sister's wedding and watch the architects of this scam face the total destruction of their artificial empire. The sprawling desert botanical garden sits on the edge of the Phoenix metropolitan area. It spans 50 acres of curated agave plants, towering saguaro cacti, and imported limestone walkways. The venue is designed to showcase the raw beauty of the Arizona landscape while providing the structured elegance of a high society country club. Arriving at the main entrance, I hand my keys to a valet and step onto the paved path leading toward the primary ceremony lawn. The late afternoon sun hangs low in the sky, casting long, sharp shadows across the red gravel. 300 guests circulate around the welcome pavilion. The dress code is formal evening wear, which feels inherently ridiculous in the desert heat. Women in floor-length silk gowns fan themselves with embossed programs, while men in dark tailored suits gather near the shade of the mesquite trees. I recognize local politicians, municipal contractors, and the managing partners of several rival development firms. They sip sparkling water with floating citrus wedges, chatting about golf handicaps and real estate zoning laws. They believe they are witnessing the union of two prominent Paradise Valley families. They do not know they are participating as background extras in the final act of a staggering financial crime. I bypass the crowded pavilion and walk directly to the ceremony seating area. The lawn is arranged with hundreds of white wooden chairs, facing a geometric arch covered in out-of-season white orchids. I do not look for an usher to seat me in the designated family rows near the front. In my line of work, you never place yourself in the center of the room during an active audit. You secure a perimeter vantage point. I choose a seat in the very last row on the far right aisle. My charcoal silk suit blends into the shadows cast by a large canvas canopy. I cross my legs, rest my hands in my lap, and begin my operational review of the targets. Richard is the first to breach my line of sight. My father stands near the altar speaking with the officiant. He wears a custom tuxedo, but the garment offers no authority today. His physical deterioration is stark. The desert air is warm, but Richard is sweating beyond the bounds of the climate. A continuous bead of moisture forms along his hairline and drips down his neck, soaking the crisp white collar of his shirt. His left hand is buried deep in his trouser pocket. His right hand grips his cellular phone, holding the device like a lifeline. He activates the screen every 3 minutes, checking his encrypted email inbox. He is waiting for a status update from the Nevada Private Equity Syndicate. He expects an automated message confirming his compliance window is still open until midnight. He is hoping the lenders will grant him a few more hours to secure the collateral from his daughter. He does not know I sent the anonymous data packet 12 hours ago. He does not know the underwriting algorithms already verified my property deed and flagged his application as fraudulent. He is standing at the altar of his daughter's wedding, unaware that the shadow loan is dead, and the asset recovery agents are already mobilizing. My gaze shifts toward the back of the seating area where the bridal party is staging. Brenda hovers near the entrance of the limestone walkway. She holds a tall flute of champagne, taking rapid, shallow sips. The alcohol does not calm her nerves. It acts as an accelerant for her panic. She darts between the ushers and the event planners, issuing sharp, rapid-fire instructions. She adjusts the posture of a groomsman. She realigns a floral marker on the back of a chair. She is attempting to micromanage the physical environment because she has lost total control of her structural reality. Her eyes constantly dart toward the guest entrance, searching for me. She needs to lock me into her trap before the reception begins. Just beyond Brenda, the glass walls of the staging conservatory reveal the bride. Jessica is the epicenter of this manufactured disaster. Through the clear panes, I watch her interact with a young woman employed by the venue catering staff. The worker is attempting to adjust the long train of Jessica's custom silk gown to prevent it from dragging across the threshold. Jessica does not offer a polite thank you. She snaps her fingers, pointing sharply at a minor wrinkle in the fabric. Her facial expressions are twisted with entitlement. She treats the service staff like indentured servants, demanding a level of perfection that only exists in edited photographs. Jessica is entirely consumed by the optics of the event. She poses for the hired videographers, ensuring the natural light catches the 2-carat diamond ring on her finger. She is blind to the decay beneath the surface. She spent her entire life believing that displaying the symbols of wealth guaranteed actual security. She does not know her venue deposit was paid with fraudulent bridge loans. She does not know the ring on her hand is technically the property of a hostile lending syndicate. She is demanding perfection from a server while standing on a sinking ship. The string quartet begins to play. The music is a slow, classical piece that signals the start of the processional. The 300 guests take their seats. The ambient chatter dies down, replaced by the rustle of expensive fabric and the synchronized turning of heads. The groomsmen walk down the aisle, followed by the bridesmaids. Trent stands at the altar waiting for his bride. He puffs out his chest, adjusting his silk tie. He wears the smug expression of a junior associate who believes he just secured the ultimate promotion. He spent 2 years playing golf with Richard, trying to ingratiate himself into the Murphy real estate empire. He thinks he is marrying into a legacy of unearned luxury. He has no idea his new father-in-law is staring down a federal indictment. The music swells. The guests stand. Richard escorts Jessica down the white runner. This traditional walk is supposed to symbolize a father offering his daughter support as she transitions into a new family. Through the lens of forensic accounting, the imagery is darkly ironic. Richard is not giving away a daughter. He is transferring a toxic liability to an unexpected creditor. They reach the altar. Richard kisses Jessica's cheek and takes his seat in the front row next to Brenda. The officiant begins to speak. He talks about commitment, resilience, and building a foundation of trust. The words ring hollow, echoing across the silent lawn. I sit in the back row watching the vows with cold detachment. I do not feel sorrow for the end of my family. I do not feel pity for the naive groom. I analyze the scene as a completed equation. Every action taken by my parents over the last 2 years was designed to reach this exact moment. They sacrificed my graduation, they fabricated a corporate smear campaign, and they attempted to weaponize the probate courts, all to ensure this specific transaction took place. They built a spectacular stage just to execute a grift. The rings are exchanged. Trent slides the platinum band onto Jessica's finger, sealing a contract built entirely on interstate wire fraud. The officiant pronounces them husband and wife. The guests erupt into polite applause. The string quartet plays an upbeat tempo. Richard stands up to clap, but his knees waver slightly. He drops his phone back into his pocket, his face a mask of poorly concealed terror. Brenda applauds loudly, turning to smile at the state senators and the developers in the crowd. She performs her role with a desperate, brittle energy. The newlyweds walk back down the aisle. The guests begin to file out of the seating area, moving toward the main conservatory for the evening reception. The sun dips below the horizon, plunging the desert into twilight. The string lights strung across the agave plants glow with a soft amber hue. The air grows cool, but the tension radiating from the wedding party is suffocating. I remain in my seat until the lawn is nearly empty. I am untethered from their drama. The emotional manipulation that used to control my actions evaporated the moment I recognized their vulnerability. The ceremony was merely the prologue. The real event, the final public play Brenda planned in the dark wine cellar, is about to unfold under the bright lights of the reception hall. I stand up, smooth the fabric of my charcoal suit, and walk toward the glass doors of the conservatory. The trap is set, but they are the ones standing inside it. The transition from the twilight outdoor lawn to the reception hall is a masterclass in calculated extravagance. The glass conservatory rises 50 feet into the night sky, framed by heavy structural steel and illuminated by hundreds of floating candles. Inside, the temperature is kept at a crisp 68 degrees, offering a stark contrast to the lingering desert heat just beyond the glass walls. The space is dominated by a central dance floor, constructed entirely from polished white marble. Suspended directly above this floor is a custom floral chandelier, spanning 20 feet across. The structure drips with thousands of imported white blooms and hand-cut crystal beads, reflecting the candlelight into every corner of the room. Waitstaff in formal black attire glide silently between round tables draped in heavy ivory linen. They pour vintage champagne into crystal flutes, moving with synchronized precision. I navigate the perimeter of the room, finding my assigned seat at table 48. It is a secondary table located near the swinging kitchen service doors, exactly where I expected to be placed. The physical distance gives me an unobstructed line of sight to the head table situated on a raised platform at the far end of the venue. Richard takes his seat next to the bride. He is physically present, but psychologically absent. He consumes 3 glasses of iced water in rapid succession, trying to hydrate a body that is shutting down from severe internal stress. He keeps his phone resting on his thigh, hidden carefully under the white tablecloth. He is still waiting for a confirmation message from the Nevada lenders that will never arrive. He believes the syndicate deadline expires at midnight, giving him just a few more hours to secure his salvation. Brenda sits on the other side of Jessica. She is operating on pure frantic adrenaline. She surveys the room with the intense calculation of a stage director on opening night. She watches the state senators and the corporate developers take their seats. She mentally calculates the exact net worth of the audience she has assembled. She needs a powerful crowd to execute her final maneuver. My mother has always utilized public spaces as instruments of extreme coercion. When I was 10 years old, I wanted to quit playing the piano because the instructor was verbally abusive. Brenda did not discuss the issue with me in private. She waited until we were attending a large family reunion dinner. She stood up, clinked her glass, and announced to 50 extended relatives that I was going to perform a complex classical sonata to honor our grandparents. She knew I despised public attention. She knew the sheer weight of 50 expectant faces would force me to walk to the keyboard and play the song. She uses crowds as a weapon to strip away your autonomy. She believes that social embarrassment is a universal compliance tool. She thinks the fear of ruining a public spectacle will always override my instinct for self-preservation. She assumes the conditioning from my childhood is still intact. She is about to apply this exact manipulative methodology to a multi-million-dollar real estate transaction. The plated dinner service takes over 2 hours. The guests consume expensive prime cuts of beef and seasonal roasted vegetables, completely oblivious to the fraudulent financial foundation supporting their silver plates. I eat my meal in silence, observing the structural integrity of the room slowly degrade. As the dessert plates are cleared away by the waitstaff, the ambient lighting dims. The string quartet fades out, and a professional master of ceremonies takes the stage to introduce the evening toasts. Trent gives a brief, shallow speech about finding his soulmate and joining a prestigious Arizona family. He raises his glass to Richard, thanking his new father-in-law for his immense generosity. Richard barely manages a weak, nauseated nod in return. The best man tells a mildly inappropriate joke that garners polite laughter from the country club crowd. Then the master of ceremonies announces the mother of the bride. Brenda stands up from the head table. She smooths the skirt of her expensive designer gown and accepts the wireless microphone from the event coordinator. She does not stand behind the wooden podium. She steps down from the raised platform and walks directly to the center of the polished marble dance floor. She positions herself precisely beneath the massive floral chandelier. A single bright spotlight tracks her movement, cutting through the dim conservatory and illuminating her in a pool of stark white light. She commands the room with flawless posture and a warm, practiced smile that hides her underlying terror. The 300 guests fall entirely silent, anticipating a heartfelt maternal tribute. She begins speaking with a soft, melodic tone. Her voice echoes perfectly through the state-of-the-art venue sound system. She thanks the guests for traveling to the desert to witness this beautiful union. She acknowledges the prominent politicians in the front rows stroking their egos with subtle, deliberate precision. Then she shifts the narrative toward the concept of enduring family legacy. She talks about the rigid values her late mother-in-law Evelyn instilled in the Murphy household. She weaves a beautiful, highly manipulative story about sisterhood and shared sacrifice. She tells a completely fabricated anecdote about how Jessica and I used to share our toys and protect each other when we were young children. She paints a vibrant portrait of a fiercely loyal family unit bound by unconditional love and boundless generosity. The wealthy audience is utterly captivated. They lean forward in their velvet chairs, absorbing the sentimental performance. They love a narrative that validates their own class values and ignores the messy reality of greed. Brenda paces slowly across the gleaming marble floor. She lowers the microphone slightly, adopting an intimate, reflective posture. She tells the crowd that building a strong marriage in modern society requires a solid, immovable foundation. She claims that establishing a family legacy in Paradise Valley requires a premier residential headquarters. She pauses, letting the weighty words hang in the cool, conditioned air. Her eyes scan the dark edges of the room, bypassing the wealthy contractors and the local television celebrities. She is hunting for her target. She finds my silhouette sitting at table 48 near the kitchen doors. Brenda raises the microphone back to her lips. She announces that tonight the Murphy family is going to demonstrate the true limitless meaning of that legacy. She calls my name. Her voice booms through the overhead speakers, inviting me to join her in the center of the room. The master of ceremonies signals the venue lighting technician. A secondary spotlight sweeps across the high glass ceiling and snaps down directly onto my assigned chair. 300 heads turn in unison. 600 eyes lock onto my face. The sheer social pressure drops onto my shoulders like a heavy lead anvil. I do not hesitate. Showing any physical reluctance implies that I am intimidated by the stage she constructed. I push my chair back and stand up. I smooth the fine fabric of my charcoal silk suit. I keep my facial expression entirely neutral, projecting absolute calm. I walk away from the shadowed perimeter and step into the glaring light. The walk from the back of the conservatory to the center of the marble dance floor feels like crossing a vast, empty desert. I pass tables filled with people who control municipal zoning laws and corporate shipping routes. I feel their eyes measuring my composure and my attire. I do not look at my father, who is staring at his empty water glass trying to breathe. I do not look at my sister, who is wearing a triumphant, greedy smile. I keep my focus entirely on the woman waiting for me under the cascading floral chandelier. I step onto the polished marble. Brenda reaches out and wraps her arm around my waist. The gesture is designed to look deeply affectionate to the audience, but her physical grip is rigid and desperate. Her sharp nails dig into my side through my suit jacket. She turns us both to face the head table. She projects her voice over the silent, expectant conservatory. She announces that I have decided to surprise the bride and groom with the ultimate wedding gift. She tells the silent room that I am officially transferring the deed to the Scottsdale penthouse to Jessica and Trent tonight. A collective gasp ripples through the massive glass room. The monetary scale of the stated gift registers immediately among the financial elite. Giving a $4 million high-rise sanctuary as a wedding present is an unprecedented display of extreme wealth. The guests erupt into deafening applause. People stand up from their tables, cheering loudly for my incredible generosity. Jessica covers her mouth with both hands, playing the role of the overwhelmed emotional bride with theatrical perfection. Trent stands up and raises his glass in a silent, stunned salute. The noise in the conservatory is absolutely deafening. The sheer volume of the celebration creates a physical vibration in the marble floor beneath my feet. Brenda does not let the momentum fade. She raises her free hand to quiet the cheering crowd. She says the Murphy family believes in making their commitments official tonight, right here in front of their closest friends. She gestures toward the front row of guest tables. A man in a sharp gray suit steps out of the crowd and onto the dance floor. He is not a wedding guest. He is a licensed notary public Brenda hired specifically for this moment. He carries a polished silver platter. Resting in the center of the platter is a digital tablet displaying a secure biometric transfer portal. The system is loaded with the final electronic deed documents. It requires a digital signature and a thumbprint scan to execute an immediate, unalterable transfer of property rights to the Nevada syndicate. The notary stops directly in front of us. He holds the silver platter out like an offering under the bright spotlight. Brenda smiles brightly at the audience, then leans her head against my shoulder. She turns her face away from the crowd and lowers the microphone to her hip, killing the live audio feed. Her lips brush against my ear. Her voice is a ragged, terrifying whisper, devoid of any maternal warmth. She tells me to sign the screen right now. She states that a courier is waiting in the resort lobby to send the digital confirmation directly to the private equity lenders. She promises that if I ruin this moment, she will release the forged corporate dossier on Monday morning and burn my accounting career to ash. I stand perfectly still under the blinding spotlight. The trap is completely sprung. Brenda engineered a highly public scenario where refusing her demand will brand me as a cruel, jealous sister in front of the entire Phoenix elite. She expects me to calculate the risk of public ruin and fold under the immense pressure. She is attempting to extort a multi-million-dollar asset using the collective expectation of 300 wealthy strangers. I look down at the glowing screen of the digital tablet. I look out at the sea of expectant faces, clapping and smiling in the dim conservatory. I look at Jessica, waiting eagerly for her stolen throne. Then I turn my head and look directly into my mother's eyes. I analyze the exact depth of her delusion. She actually believes this theatrical performance will save her from a federal prison sentence. The audience waits breathless for my reaction as the social pressure reaches a boiling point. The notary holds the polished silver platter out toward me. The digital tablet screen glows brightly under the targeted spotlight. My mother leans against my shoulder, expecting swift compliance. She operates on the premise that public humiliation is a universal currency. She assumes I value the perception of these 300 wealthy guests more than my own sanctuary. This is the fundamental error of a narcissist. They project their own vulnerabilities onto their targets. She would surrender her soul to avoid a society scandal, so she assumes I will surrender my property to avoid the same fate. I look at the notary. He is a hired functionary caught in a trap he does not comprehend. He tilts the platter forward, offering me the electronic stylus. The audience holds its breath. The silence in the glass room is thick and expectant. I do not reach for the tablet. I reach for the wireless microphone still gripped tightly in the hand of my mother. I pull the cold metal cylinder from her grasp. The sudden friction produces a sharp burst of static feedback through the overhead speakers. The harsh noise cuts through the elegant atmosphere like a warning siren. The wealthy attendees shift in their velvet chairs. The forced smiles on their faces falter. The master of ceremonies takes a hesitant step forward but stops when he registers my rigid posture. I bring the microphone to my mouth. I do not rush my cadence. I speak with the clear, measured tone of an auditor delivering a final catastrophic revenue report. I thank the guests for attending. My voice bounces off the high glass panels, reaching every corner of the room. I state that the narrative presented tonight is a fascinating piece of fiction. I explain that Evelyn did not leave a family legacy meant to be shared or leveraged. She left a secure asset to the only person who refused to participate in a lifelong charade. The property located in Scottsdale is solely in my name, I announce. It is not mine to give away, and it is certainly not yours to steal. The words drop into the crowd like heavy stones. I do not stop. I inform the state senators, the municipal developers, and the country club elite that they are currently sitting inside a fabricated illusion. I tell them the out-of-season floral arrangements, the designer gowns, and the vintage champagne were not purchased through entrepreneurial success. They were funded by unrecorded debt and falsified loan applications. I state that the demand for my biometric signature tonight was not a heartwarming gesture of sisterhood. It was a desperate attempt to secure collateral for a shadow syndicate operating out of Nevada. The reaction from the audience is instantaneous and raw. 300 influential citizens process the reality that they are background actors in a financial scam. A low murmur begins at the front tables and rapidly builds into a wave of shocked gasps. Wealthy individuals survive on optics and risk mitigation. They immediately recognize the toxicity of the situation. They begin pulling their chairs back, distancing themselves from the head table. Jessica stands frozen on the raised platform. She spent her entire existence defining her worth through material acquisition and social envy. She married Trent under the assumption that she possessed a royal bloodline. The illusion shatters in real time. Her hand trembles. The crystal champagne flute slips from her fingers. It strikes the marble floor, sending shards of glass and expensive alcohol splashing across her pristine white silk hem. She lets out a sharp, piercing scream, but nobody moves to comfort her. Trent takes a deliberate step away from his new bride, his eyes wide with sudden realization. He is a junior associate who just chained himself to an insolvent sinking vessel. At the far end of the head table, the structural collapse reaches Richard. He has spent the last 2 years running from a ledger he could not balance. He falsified documents crossed state lines and burned his retirement funds to maintain his country club facade. As I speak the final words into the microphone, the device resting on his thigh begins to vibrate. It is not a polite notification. It is a sustained, continuous buzz indicating an automated priority action. The Nevada private equity underwriters have processed the anonymous data packet I sent 12 hours ago. The algorithms verified the forged deed. The syndicate executed the default clause. Richard pulls the phone from beneath the ivory tablecloth. He stares at the glowing screen. The text informs him that his shadow loan is voided, his primary residence is under immediate foreclosure, and the forged application has been transmitted to federal authorities. The blood drains from his face, leaving a stark gray canvas. His breathing turns shallow and ragged. He drops the phone onto his dinner plate. He clutches his chest with his right hand and collapses backward into his chair. He does not faint, but his body betrays him, folding under the crushing weight of a ruined future. Brenda watches her husband collapse. She watches her golden child weeping over a ruined dress. She looks out at the audience of wealthy socialites who are now whispering and pointing at her family. The society she worshipped for 3 decades is actively rejecting her. Her mind cannot process the defeat. When a manipulator realizes their theater is dismantled, they default to pure physical rage. The elegant matriarch vanishes. She lunges at me. She crosses the 3 feet of marble floor, separating us with terrifying speed. She swings her right arm with every ounce of desperate energy she possesses. Her open palm connects with the left side of my face. The impact sounds like a gunshot over the open microphone. The sheer force of the strike snaps my head to the side. A blinding flash of heat blooms across my cheek. A collective gasp erupts from the crowd. Someone near the back of the room shouts in shock. The notary drops his silver platter. The tablet hits the marble floor and cracks the screen, going dark. For a fraction of a second, time suspends. The music is gone. The ambient chatter is dead. The only sound in the vast glass conservatory is my own steady breathing, picked up by the microphone still gripped in my hand. I taste the metallic tang of copper where my teeth caught the inside of my lip. I do not reach up to touch my stinging face. I do not stumble. I slowly roll my jaw and bring my head back to center. I look directly into the eyes of my mother. She is panting heavily, her chest heaving against her expensive designer gown. Her striking hand hovers in the air, shaking uncontrollably. She expects me to retaliate or break down in tears. She expects the physical assault to restore the power dynamic she just lost. She sees nothing but cold, objective detachment reflecting back at her. The blow did not hurt me. It liberated me. It severed the final decaying thread of duty I held toward these people. The charade is permanently over, I state into the microphone. My voice does not waver. The clarity of the declaration cuts through the thick tension of the room. I lower the microphone and place it gently onto the nearest dining table. I turn my back on my mother. I walk toward the rear exit of the conservatory. The sea of elite guests parts for me, forming a wide, unobstructed path. They do not offer false sympathy, and they do not attempt to intervene. They simply move out of my way, viewing me with a mixture of shock and profound respect. They just watched a woman stand under a targeted spotlight, absorb a brutal physical strike, and systematically dismantle a fraudulent empire without shedding a single tear. I push the heavy glass double doors open and step out into the cool desert night. The heavy doors swing shut behind me, muting the chaos inside the reception hall. The crisp air hits my burning cheek, offering immediate relief. I walk down the illuminated limestone pathway toward the valet station. I know the legal and federal machinery is already in motion. The internal family war is concluded. The external consequences are about to arrive. I walk down the illuminated limestone pathway toward the valet station. The desert night air is cool against my skin. The sharp sting on my left cheek is already fading into a dull throb. The gravel crunches under my shoes. I hand my ticket to the parking attendant. Before the young man can even turn toward the vehicle lot, A convoy of 4 dark sport utility vehicles turns off the main highway and speeds up the circular driveway. The vehicles do not stop at the designated guest drop-off zone. They mount the curb and park at sharp angles directly in front of the main entrance to the botanical garden. The doors of the vehicles open simultaneously. 8 individuals step out into the amber glow of the driveway lights. They wear dark windbreakers and tailored suits. 4 of them display federal badges clipped to their belts. The other 4 are private asset recovery contractors hired directly by the Nevada syndicate. In the world of high finance, unregulated private equity firms do not wait for standard business hours to protect their capital. They employ retired law enforcement officers to fast-track their fraud referrals directly to the Department of Justice. When a multi-million-dollar shadow loan defaults due to forged documents, the response is immediate and tactical. They bypass the confused valet attendants and walk with synchronized purpose down the limestone path, heading straight for the glass conservatory. I do not get into my car. I step back into the shadow of a large mesquite tree and watch the operation unfold. The glass walls of the reception hall provide a clear, unobstructed view of the interior. The federal agents push through the heavy double doors. They do not announce themselves over the sound system. They do not need to. The sheer authoritative weight of their presence stops the room. Waitstaff freeze with trays of champagne suspended in the air. The remaining wealthy guests who were already standing up to leave after my departure halt in their tracks. The lead investigator walks directly down the center of the marble dance floor. He steps over the shattered glass of Jessica's dropped champagne flute. He approaches the raised platform and stops in front of the head table. Richard is still slumped in his chair, clutching his chest. The investigator reaches down and picks up the cellular phone Richard dropped on his dinner plate. In cases of interstate wire fraud, the primary device used to transmit the forged digital application becomes immediate state evidence. The investigator places the phone into a sealed plastic evidence bag. He looks down at my father. I watch the investigator's lips move as he reads the formal charges. He informs Richard that he is under arrest for felony wire fraud and the submission of falsified collateral documents across state lines. Richard does not protest. He lacks the oxygen and the leverage to fight. He places his trembling hands flat on the ivory tablecloth. 2 agents step forward and pull his arms behind his back, securing his wrists with steel restraints. The loud metallic clicks echo through the quiet room. The visual is stark. The patriarch of a supposedly elite Paradise Valley family is handcuffed next to an imported floral centerpiece. Brenda is standing frozen near the edge of the platform. The frantic energy that fueled her physical assault on me just minutes ago is entirely drained. She looks at the federal agents with hollow, uncomprehending eyes. A secondary investigator approaches her. Spouses who actively manage the household ledgers and sign the joint tax returns are rarely granted immunity when the primary earner commits financial felonies. Brenda knowingly participated in the facade and directly attempted to extort me to cover the crime. The investigator informs her she is being detained as an active co-conspirator. An agent guides her down the steps of the platform by her elbow. She walks with a stiff, unnatural gait. Her designer gown drags across the marble floor, sweeping through the puddle of spilled champagne. The realization of what is happening ripples through the 300 guests. The elite social circles of Arizona operate on a strict code of optics and self-preservation. Attending a wedding where the hosts are federally indicted in real time is a public relations disaster. The wealthy contractors, the state politicians, and the municipal developers do not wait to offer their sympathies. The stampede begins. It is not a panicked run, but a rapid, calculated exodus. Chairs scrape harshly against the marble. Silk wraps are snatched from the backs of velvet seats. The guests flood toward the side exits and the patio doors, desperate to escape the blast radius of the scandal. They abandon their expensive plated dinners and their half-empty crystal goblets. The venue transforms from a celebration of luxury into an active crime scene within 60 seconds. The people Brenda spent decades trying to impress abandon her without a single backward glance. They treat the Murphy family like a contagious disease. Jessica remains at the head table. She stands alone amidst the abandoned chairs and the discarded cloth napkins. Her white custom silk gown looks absurd in the context of the federal raid. She watches her parents being escorted across the dance floor by armed agents. Her entire identity was built on the premise that she was a wealthy, untouchable heiress. She spent her adolescence demanding perfection and treating service workers with disdain because she believed her status insulated her from consequences. Now the scaffolding holding up her ego has vanished. The money never existed. The prestige was a lie. She looks around the emptying room for a lifeline. She turns to her right looking for Trent. Trent is nowhere near the head table. I scan the perimeter of the room and locate him near the rear kitchen service doors. Trent built his nascent career in commercial real estate by reading the room and identifying toxic liabilities. He married Jessica because he believed she came with a multi-million-dollar safety net and access to high-net-worth clients. The moment he watched the federal agents handcuff his new father-in-law, he performed a rapid mental audit of his marriage. He realized his bride possessed no trust fund, no property, and a shattered social reputation. Trent treats his marriage exactly like a bad stock option. He recognizes the sunk cost fallacy. He knows that staying with Jessica means absorbing the legal fees, the public humiliation, and the staggering debt left behind by Richard. He is a man who relies on country club networking to secure his real estate commissions. Being tied to a family facing federal wire fraud charges would obliterate his earning potential in Scottsdale. He makes a brutal, instantaneous calculation. He decides that the social embarrassment of an annulment is far cheaper than the financial ruin of staying married. Trent does not walk over to comfort a weeping Jessica. He does not approach the investigators to defend his new family. He watches the agents lead Richard and Brenda toward the front doors. Then he unbuttons his bespoke suit jacket, takes one last look at the ruined reception, and steps backward through the swinging kitchen doors. He slips out the service exit, abandoning his wife less than 2 hours after exchanging their vows. He cuts his losses the moment the financial pipeline runs dry. I stand under the mesquite tree, watching the red and blue emergency lights reflect off the glass panels of the conservatory. The scene is a perfect demonstration of conditional loyalty. Toxic people build relationships based entirely on utility. They surround themselves with individuals who value transactions over authentic connection. Brenda and Richard viewed me as a utility account. Jessica viewed Trent as a status symbol. Trent viewed Jessica as a bank. When you build a house out of leverage and transactional alliances, it only takes one structural failure to bring the entire roof down. The moment the money evaporated, the loyalty evaporated with it. The asset recovery agents do not care about the emotional devastation of the bride. They are auditors executing a hostile liquidation. I watch through the glass as they pull clipboards from their windbreakers. They begin speaking with the venue management and the catering director. The syndicate has authorized them to freeze all tangible assets related to the event. The imported out-of-season white orchids, the custom lighting installations, and the remaining cases of vintage champagne are no longer wedding decorations. They are seized property. The agents place official holds on the vendor contracts, ensuring the syndicate can liquidate the materials to recover a fraction of the stolen funds. This is the ultimate consequence of projecting an artificial reality. My family spent decades treating their financial obligations like a game of optics, assuming they could always manipulate the ledger to hide their true deficits. They believed they could outsmart the system by demanding loyalty from the people they abused. They failed to understand that the system does not care about your designer wardrobe or your social status. The system only cares about the numbers. When the numbers finally zero out, the illusion shatters with spectacular force. The red and blue emergency lights from the federal vehicles cut through the dark desert night, illuminating the tall saguaro cacti surrounding the venue. The guests have successfully cleared the parking lot, leaving only the law enforcement vehicles and the abandoned luxury sedans of the wedding party. The transition from a high society gala to a forensic crime scene is complete. I watch my parents being loaded into the back of separate federal transport vehicles. They will spend their first night away from Paradise Valley, sitting in a sterile holding cell, waiting for a bail hearing they cannot afford. I turn away from the scene. My heart rate is steady, and my mind is clear. I walk to the valet station and find my vehicle waiting. The attendant hands me the keys without a word, his eyes wide as he watches the federal agents secure the perimeter. I slide into the driver's seat and start the engine. I drive out of the botanical garden, merging onto the quiet desert highway. I leave the wreckage of my family in the rearview mirror, heading back to my secure sanctuary, knowing the threat is permanently neutralized. The morning after the federal raid, I wake up in my Scottsdale sanctuary. The desert sun crests over the Camelback Mountains, painting the sky in pale shades of orange and gold. The air inside the penthouse is still and quiet. I brew a pot of dark roast coffee and walk out onto the terrace. I look down at the awakening city, knowing that 30 miles away, my parents are waking up in a federal detention center. They are wearing standard-issue uniforms, sitting on steel benches, waiting for an arraignment hearing they cannot afford to fight. The contrast between my reality and theirs is stark, but it evokes no pity within me. I sip my coffee and prepare for the upcoming legal audit. The true scope of their delusion does not emerge until the middle of the week. In cases involving interstate wire fraud, the Department of Justice moves with terrifying speed. They freeze all remaining assets and unseal the digital communication logs. My corporate attorney Sarah calls me on a Thursday afternoon. She does not sound like a lawyer discussing a standard civil dispute. She sounds like a professional auditor who just uncovered a masterpiece of financial self-sabotage. She asked me to come down to her downtown Phoenix office to review a newly unsealed piece of evidence. I sit across from Sarah at her sleek glass desk. She opens a thick manila folder and slides a single printed document toward me. It is a secondary loan application filed directly with the Nevada Private Equity Syndicate. I look at the timestamp printed in the upper right corner. The application was submitted on Saturday morning at 9:15. It was filed just hours before my parents walked down the aisle at the Botanical Garden. Sarah explains the mechanics of the astonishing payoff. Richard knew the syndicate was growing restless regarding the delayed collateral. He knew the deadline was approaching, and he feared I would refuse to sign the transfer at the reception. He could not risk waiting for the evening spectacle. He and Brenda decided to force the transaction digitally. They submitted a forged electronic quitclaim deed, attempting to transfer the title of the Scottsdale Penthouse into a blind offshore holding company they controlled. They digitally forged my signature and my biometric security clearance code using stolen data points they purchased on the dark web. They believed the transaction would process smoothly and buy them enough time to navigate the wedding. They failed to realize the trap was already armed and waiting. Because I had initiated contact with the Nevada syndicate the night before, the lenders were already on high alert. I provided undeniable proof of my ownership and flagged my own residential profile within their system. The syndicate underwriters fed my data into the federal banking verification network. When Richard submitted the forged signature on Saturday morning, he did not just fail a background check. He tripped an automatic felony flag across the entire federal wire system. The banking algorithms recognized the fraudulent electronic signature instantly. The system locked the transmission and sent an immediate alert to the regional field office of the Federal Bureau of Investigation. Richard did not buy himself more time. He handed the federal government the exact piece of physical evidence required to issue an immediate arrest warrant. His desperate attempt to steal my property on the morning of the wedding was the specific mechanism that guaranteed his prison sentence. If he had simply done nothing, he might have only faced civil bankruptcy proceedings. His refusal to respect my boundaries resulted in a swift, tactical liquidation of his freedom. This outcome highlights a profound truth about predatory individuals. You rarely need to engineer their destruction. You simply need to stand firm and let their own momentum carry them over the edge. Toxic people operate on a continuous cycle of escalating risk. They believe the rules of reality do not apply to them. They assume they can manipulate federal banking systems the same way they manipulate family dynamics. When you refuse to act as their safety net, they are forced to take increasingly reckless gambles to maintain their illusion. They build their own traps and they pull the levers themselves. Total detachment is not just a psychological boundary, it is the ultimate form of self-defense. While Richard and Brenda navigate the sterile reality of federal holding cells, the collateral damage strikes the golden child. Jessica wakes up on Sunday morning in a discounted hotel room instead of a luxury resort suite. The wedding venue canceled their post-reception brunch when the credit cards declined. She is left sitting among the wreckage of her curated social image. She expects Trent to formulate a plan to restore their status. She expects her new husband to secure a loan and rescue her from the humiliation. Trent possesses a different set of priorities. He returns to the hotel room on Monday afternoon, carrying a single briefcase. He does not offer comfort or reassurance. He hands Jessica a stack of legal papers. It is a formal petition for an annulment. The speed of the legal filing is brutal. Trent spent 2 years cultivating a relationship with the Murphy family because he believed he was marrying into a real estate dynasty. He viewed Jessica as a direct conduit to the $4 million Scottsdale penthouse. When the federal agents handcuffed Richard on the dance floor, Trent performed a rapid audit of his new bride. He realized Jessica held no trust fund, no property, and zero earning potential. She was a liability carrying the toxic weight of a public federal scandal. Trent does not attempt to hide his motives. In the state of Arizona, an annulment can be granted on the grounds of fraud. Trent cites intentional misrepresentation in his legal filing. He formally states that the marriage was predicated on the promise of significant financial assets that were deliberately fabricated by the bride and her parents. He documents the lie, framing the entire relationship as a breach of contract. He leaves the hotel room and blocks her phone number before she can even read the second page. The psychological shatter is total. Jessica spent her entire adolescence and young adult life believing her worth was defined by her proximity to wealth and prestige. Brenda and Richard trained her to view the world as a transactional hierarchy where the right designer dress and the right country club membership guaranteed success. They never taught her resilience. They never taught her how to generate her own income. They funded her delusions while extracting resources from me. Now the funding is permanently terminated. Jessica is left with no assets, no husband, and a deeply compromised social reputation. The elite friends she invited to her botanical garden wedding refused to return her calls. The sorority sisters she tried to impress delete their photographs with her to avoid association with a federal wire fraud indictment. She is a status symbol without a sponsor. On Wednesday evening, I am sitting in my home office reviewing a quarterly tax projection for a corporate client. My encrypted phone rests on the desk. A restricted number bypasses the primary call filter and goes straight to voicemail. I open the audio file. It is Jessica. The haughty, entitled country club cadence is entirely gone. Her voice is ragged and choked with genuine tears. She does not threaten me with legal ruin. She is broken. She begs me for a short-term loan. She says she cannot afford the cancellation fees the wedding vendors are demanding. She says Trent took the remaining cash from their joint checking account. She pleads with me to remember that we are sisters. She asks me to let her stay in the guest suite of the penthouse until she can figure out a plan. I listen to the voicemail while looking out the glass window at the dark outline of the mountains. The request is a classic manipulation tactic used by a fallen golden child. She spent years participating in the smear campaigns and the extortion attempts when she thought she held the high ground. The moment the ground collapses, she attempts to invoke the very family loyalty she spent her life violating. She expects the designated utility account to power back on and rescue her from the darkness. I do not feel the urge to rescue her. I do not feel the urge to lecture her or extract an apology. I delete the voicemail. I update my security protocols to block all restricted numbers. I walk out to the terrace and lean against the cool metal railing. The desert wind sweeps across the valley, carrying the scent of dry earth and sagebrush. I watch the headlights trace slow lines along the distant highways. I realize the war is truly over. The architects of the scam are locked in federal cells. The golden child is learning the harsh mechanics of a world that does not accept fraudulent currency. The empire they tried to build on my back has been reduced to legal debris. I turn away from the city lights and walk back inside my secure fortress, ready to embrace a future defined by peace and pristine ledgers. 6 months have passed since the federal raid dismantled the wedding reception at the Botanical Garden. The brutal Arizona summer has finally surrendered to a crisp, bright November morning. I wake up in the master suite of the Scottsdale Penthouse. The floor-to-ceiling windows frame a perfect view of the Camelback Mountains. The sky is a deep, clear blue devoid of any clouds. I walk into the kitchen and grind fresh, dark roast coffee beans. The sound of the grinder is the only noise in the massive space. The silence used to feel like a temporary pause between family crises, waiting for the next frantic demand or calculated insult. Now the silence is a permanent fixture. It is a reward for holding the line. I pour my coffee into a ceramic mug and walk out onto the terrace. The desert air is sharp and clean. I look down at the city grid. Thousands of cars commute along the highways below me. I am entirely removed from the chaos. I built a fortress and the walls held firm. The professional landscape shifted dramatically in the wake of the scandal. In the immediate aftermath, I assumed my corporate accounting firm might view the federal indictment of my parents as a public relations liability. The reality proved to be the exact opposite. Corporate America operates on a ruthless meritocracy that values results over pleasantries. My managing partner, David, read the finalized federal reports regarding the wire fraud. He saw the undeniable data proving that I was the anonymous whistleblower who dismantled a multi-million-dollar shadow loan scheme without missing a single day of work. He realized that a junior auditor who can coldly dismantle her own toxic family to uphold ethical standards is an unstoppable asset. 2 weeks after the wedding raid, David called me into his glass-walled office. He did not ask about my emotional state. He handed me the lead auditor position for a massive interstate merger involving a volatile healthcare conglomerate. He told me the client was aggressive and prone to using intimidation tactics to hide their failing ledgers. He smiled and said he knew I was immune to intimidation. My career skyrocketed in the following months. I now command my own division within the firm. I spend my days dissecting fraudulent corporate records and presenting undeniable data to hostile boards of directors. The unshakable composure I forged in the fires of my mother's manipulation is now my most lucrative professional currency. I do not flinch when wealthy executives raise their voices. I simply point to the math. While my professional life expands, my parents' world has shrunk to a concrete space measuring 8 feet by 10 feet. Richard and Brenda are currently residing in a federal detention center waiting for their official trial dates. The justice system does not grant bail to individuals caught forging biometric real estate transfers and attempting to flee massive shadow debts. The Nevada private equity syndicate proved to be a relentless adversary. The lenders liquidated the Paradise Valley estate within 60 days. They seized the luxury vehicles, the designer jewelry, and every remaining cent in the secondary bank accounts. The illusion of old money was stripped down to the studs, leaving nothing but a vast crater of federal restitution. My parents wear matching drab olive jumpsuits. They eat scheduled meals on metal trays. They meet with overworked public defenders through thick plexiglass windows. Brenda no longer hosts charity luncheons or dictates the social calendar of the country club. Her entire existence is governed by wardens and guard shifts. Richard no longer plays golf with municipal developers. He spends his days sitting on a steel bunk, realizing that his lifelong pursuit of artificial status cost him his freedom. They gambled their entire lives on a single fraudulent hand, and the house took everything. The most poetic justice, however, was reserved for the golden child. Jessica spent her entire adolescence shielded from the basic mechanics of reality. She was conditioned to believe that her mere existence entitled her to absolute luxury. When Trent abandoned her at the wedding venue and successfully filed for an annulment, she was left completely exposed to the elements. She possessed no trust fund, no college degree, and no employable skills. Furthermore, the furious wedding vendors still demanded payment for the canceled reception, the imported orchids, and the custom lighting rigs. Since the contracts were signed in her name, she inherited a staggering amount of civil debt. The cold, unyielding nature of the real world forced Jessica to seek actual employment. She now works at a high-end retail boutique in the Scottsdale Fashion Square Mall. It is a venue she used to frequent as a wealthy customer demanding special treatment from the staff. Now she wears a uniform name tag and stands on her feet for 9 hours a day. She spends her shifts folding designer silk blouses and organizing shoe displays for minimum wage. A significant portion of her weekly paycheck is automatically garnished by the civil courts to pay back the Botanical Garden Catering Company. The ultimate humiliation occurs on a weekly basis. The wealthy socialites who attended her disastrous wedding frequently shop at this specific boutique. Jessica is forced to ring up their purchases. She has to smile politely and hand shopping bags to the exact women who watched her parents get handcuffed on the dance floor. The elite circle she desperately wanted to rule now treats her as an invisible retail clerk. She receives no pity. In high society, you are only as valuable as your last successful transaction. Jessica has nothing left to trade. She sent me one final email 2 months ago begging me to buy her a reliable used car because her daily commute on the public bus system was exhausting. I did not reply. I routed her email address directly to the spam folder. Standing on my balcony, I watched the morning sun reflect off the glass skyscrapers of downtown Phoenix. I take a slow sip of my coffee, letting the warmth spread through my chest. The toxic noise that defined my youth has been permanently muted. There are no more frantic demands for money. There are no more fabricated guilt trips. The designated utility account is closed and the parasites have starved. Society places a massive, heavy burden on the concept of family loyalty. We are constantly conditioned to believe that shared genetics require infinite forgiveness. We are told to keep the peace to compromise and to absorb mistreatment because blood ties are sacred. We watch movies and read books that celebrate the idea of endless sacrifice for our relatives. But this narrative is a dangerous trap designed by people who rely on your compliance to survive. If you are listening to this right now and you are suffocating under the weight of someone else's entitlement, you need to hear the objective truth. Blood relation does not entitle anyone to your peace. Blood relation does not entitle anyone to your property or your future. Loyalty must be earned through mutual respect and consistent healthy behavior. When toxic people demand that you set yourself on fire just to keep them warm, the only correct answer is to walk away and let them freeze. You are not required to subsidize their delusions. You do not owe your sanity to manipulators who treat you like a disposable resource. I built a life on verifiable data and structural integrity. I cut out the failing components of my network, and the resulting growth was exponential. You hold the power to do the exact same thing. You can lock the doors on the people who bring chaos into your sanctuary. You can build a fortress that they cannot breach. Thank you for walking through this journey with me. If my story gave you the strength to evaluate your own ledgers and cut off your toxic liabilities, please hit the like button and subscribe to Senior Echo Stories for more empowering narratives of survival and justice. The fortress holds, and I am entirely free.